I always thought the forest was just trees and silence, nothing more. Ghost stories were for campfire tales, not real life. But after my first night in Cedar Flats, that certainty started to unravel. When they handed me the ranger's badge and keys to the old lookout cabin, I figured it was just another seasonal job. I had no idea the woods had been waiting for me to listen. When they offered me the Cedar Flats assignment, I thought it would be an easy transfer. Soft trails, serene meadows, occasional wildlife encounters. I've been a ranger for 7 years, seen my share of rattlesnake bites and drunken campers, but nothing prepared me for Cedar Flats. They didn't warn me about the old growth cedars that seemed to breathe, nor did they mention the missing hikers whose footprints simply vanished. They just handed me a key, pointed me to the ranger cabin at the trailhead, and said, "Enjoy the quiet." But Cedar Flats wasn't quiet. Not really. Every dawn, I heard distant but unmistakable whispers, like the forest itself was communicating in a tongue no human should understand. By nightfall, I felt eyes on me, millions of unseen watchers interrupting my sleep. And when I dared to investigate, the forest answered back. I learned quickly that Cedar Flats held secrets that refused to stay buried, melodies that refused to stay silent, and a hunger that refused to be denied. This is what happened to me over the next fortnight. 14 nights of dread, revelation, and a final dawn I barely lived to see. I arrived at Cedar Flats Ranger Station on a sweltering July afternoon. The station sat at the end of a 2-mile dirt access road, surrounded on 3 sides by a ring of ancient cedar trees. The building looked newer than most backcountry structures. Fresh paint, sturdy roof, and a granite-tooled porch with my name etched in the plaque beside the door, Ranger Emery Chase. They furnished it with basic necessities: a cot, a wood-burning stove, a desk with a single map of the flats, and a bookshelf with outdated field guides. No phone, no internet, just an old crank radio linked to the main office 80 miles away. I unpacked my gear quickly. Uniform shirts, a battered utility knife, a night vision monocular, and enough jerky and trail bars to last a week. I flipped the map over, tracing my finger along the meandering trails: Cedar Ridge Loop, Pine Hollow Trail, the old Firewatch Path. But at the map's center was a place simply labeled The Grove. No description, no contour lines, just a blank circle. A frown. Usually these maps at least marked landmarks like springs or campsites, but the Grove was a void. When I asked the senior dispatcher about it, he chuckled and said, "Old coats. Just a placeholder. Don't worry about it. Stay away from the deep woods before night. The sun goes quick under those cedars." I considered it odd, but shrugging, I lifted my pack and set off along Cedar Ridge Loop. By the time I reached the first lookout, an outcrop of smooth granite overlooking the flats, I realized the canopy was so thick in places that the sunlight barely penetrated. Down below, the meadows spread emerald green, dotted with lupin and fireweed. The wind was gentle, the birds active. Exactly what I expected. On my return, just as the sun dipped behind the eastern ridge, I stopped at the edge of the Trailkeeper campsite, a clearing with a stone fire ring and a rotted picnic table. The air turned brittle, and I heard it for the very first time, a soft, high-pitched whisper, barely above a breath, threading its way through the cedars. I froze. The sound came from deeper in the woods, rising and falling in a pattern that felt deliberate, as if someone or something was calling my name in the undercurrent of hushed voices. I strained to listen, scanning the gloom beneath the trees. No movement, only the thick trunks, their bark roped and splintered, shadows pooling like ink at their bases. Hello, I called, voice echoing across the clearing. No answer. My heart thrummed. I clicked on my headlamp and peered toward the darkness. The whispering stopped as abruptly as it began, leaving only the crackle of pine needles underfoot. I shrugged it off as wind stirring through the treetops. But even as I said it to myself, I listened for more. Nothing, only my own breathing and the distant murmur of the creek. That first night I slept fitfully. Even with the window shuttered, I heard distant rustling, a scraping sound that might have been deer in the underbrush, or something else stepping across dead branches. When I closed my eyes, I dreamt I was walking beneath the cedars alone, and the trees spoke in riddles I couldn't decipher. I woke twice in the moonlit dark, certain I saw silhouettes moving between the trunks. But each time I blinked, they were gone. At dawn, I brewed black coffee on the wood stove and recorded my observations in the station log. Nervous sleep. Hearing whispering. Likely wind. We'll conduct trail patrol today. I left the cabin at first light, heading out on Pine Hollow Trail, a route I'd chosen for its relatively open undergrowth, good for checking bear activity and hiker traffic. By mid-morning, I encountered a solitary set of footprints leading off trail toward a narrow ravine. The boots were women's hiking shoes, small, size 6 or 7, fresh impressions in damp loam. I followed them warily, scanning the trees for her. After a quarter mile, the track ended at a twisted cedar whose roots formed a natural arch. Beneath the arch lay a backpack, bright red, unzipped, with a neon green water bottle rolling in the fan of sunlight. I approached slowly, rifle slung low. The area around the bag was scuffed, leaves shredded, as if someone had sat or even struggled there. I peeked inside. A pair of pink socks, a soggy sandwich wrapper, a cell phone with a screen cracked. No sign of the owner. Just the feeling of stale breath in the cold shade. My stomach nodded. I radioed base, dispatch, this is Ranger Chase. Found abandoned backpack. No sign of owner. Last seen heading off Pine Hollow Trail. Near Cedar Arch, request immediate assistance. Silence, then static. The radio crackled. Test. Cedar Flats read you out. That wasn't helpful. Something made me sweat. I returned the bag to its original position, took a photo for evidence, and scrawled notes in my notebook about a missing hiker. Female, mid-20s, camping solo, overdue by 12 hours according to check-in. I reported it again. Same static response, unclear. They promised to send a search team tomorrow. Night descended quickly. I pitched a small dome tent at the Trailkeeper campsite, planning to watch the ravine at first light. At 11:45 p.m., I woke to someone calling my name, softly, urgently. Chase. Chase. I sat bolt upright, heart thundering. The voice came from the forest edge, not from inside the tent. I unzipped my door and peered out. The moon was full, and in its silver wash, I glimpsed a figure standing 100 yards away, half hidden by cedars. I couldn't make out details, just the silhouette of a woman, hair blowing in a breeze I didn't feel, arms at her sides, watching me. "Ma'am," I shouted, "are you okay?" She didn't move. The whispering rose again and ached behind my ears. "Help us! Find us!" It wasn't a single voice, but many layered together like the breath of the forest. Then the silhouette tilted her head and turned, stepping carefully out of sight. When I fumbled with my flashlight to track her, I caught only a glimpse, a floral patterned dress, pale skin, empty eyes flickering gold in the moonlight, before she dissolved into the tree-line. I sat frozen until the whispers subsided. In the forest behind me, the cedars were still as sentinels holding their secrets. I dare not follow. Instead, I stayed in the tent until dawn, trembling so badly I feared I'd tip over. At first light, I found no footprints around the ravine. No sign she'd ever been there, except the backpack. Over the next 2 days, I organized a small search party, 2 volunteer rangers and a K-9 unit. We combed Pine Hollow and Cedar Ridge Loop with no success. The K-9 dog, Harper, hesitated near the arch but refused to continue deeper into the ravine. I chalked it up to tracks too old or faint to follow. But every time we approached Cedar Arch, a chill settled over me. It felt like stepping into an open wound. Back at the station at night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They weren't just carrying my name. They were humming in a pattern. 3 rising notes, 1 held, 2 falling, like a melody that teased the edge of recognition. It felt like half-remembered lullaby, half-remembered curse. When I flipped on my headlamp to check the cabin walls, I thought I saw shadows, tall, lean shapes shifting beyond the windows. I convinced myself my mind was frayed by lost sleep. On day 3, around noon, one of the volunteer rangers, Brooke, disappeared. We were searching the Pine Hollow Rangers lookout, a platform 30 feet high reached by a narrow ladder of rungs bolted to a tree. Brooke climbed up to inspect old signal equipment and called down, "Looks clear, no one around." I followed soon after, using binoculars from the ground. But Brooke never came down. I climbed the ladder and found his pack at the base, his radio hanging by a strap from a peg. Up top, the lookout was empty except for a scrap of his blue jacket snagged on a splintered beam. His boots were gone. I scanned the tree-line, no movement. The cedar trunks gleamed in the sun, silent. I called his name. No answer except the echo, my voice bouncing back at me, distorted, like it was mocking me. I radioed for backup, then climbed to the platform again, peering through binoculars deeper into the cedars. There, deep in the shadows, I glimpsed a figure in the distance, standing where no trail existed. It wore Brooke's jacket, but the head was turned away. I met its eye with my scope, empty sockets or glasses glinting in the midday light. Then it vanished behind a massive cedar, as though never there. I limped back to station, every sense screaming. The other ranger, Nolan, looked pale when I returned. I heard his voice on the radio a moment ago, saying, "Help me, help me." then silence. "I can't find where it came from," he said, voice trembling. I stared at the radio. No signals, no static, just nothing. Overnight, I sat in the station office, trying to make sense. 3 missing hikers in 3 nights. Each time, footprints leading to cedars, their calls for help echoing, then gone. Always more branches snapped than any deer or bear would cause. Always the same whispering melody, 3 rising notes, hold, 2 falling. And always the oppressive sense that the cedars themselves were leaning in closer. I decided to hike into the grove, the blank circle on the map no one explained. If the missing were drawn there, I needed to know why. At dawn, I packed minimal gear, knife, radio with fresh batteries, binocular, and slipped into the cedars, no one swearing he'd bring help if I didn't return in 6 hours. The entrance to the grove lay deep in Pine Hollow, about 3 miles beyond Cedar Arch. The trail narrowed into mashed soil, tangled roots, and thick moss. As I ventured in, the cedars grew closer, their limbs intertwining for overhead cover so dense I had to use my headlamp even at midday. The air turned stale, humid, like being in a tomb. My footsteps sank into soft earth, and I noticed broken branches everywhere, as if something big and desperate had clawed its way through. I checked my compass. It spun erratically, both needle ends quivering without pointing north. I reached for my GPS blank screen. I tried to reset it. No response. I cursed under my breath. Not surprising, at the station the map warned dead zone beyond this point. I climbed a mossy stump and scanned all directions. The cedars stretched out in every direction, trunks black as coal, their bark stretched in deep vertical grooves. The forest was alive, pressing in, suffocatingly close. Then I heard it again, the whispering melody clear as dawn's chorus. 3 ascending tones, one held too long, 2 descending notes. I froze. It felt less like a warning this time, and more like a summons, an invitation. The sound seemed to emanate from the ground itself, vibrating through the trill of leaves at my feet. I followed the melody, stepping carefully around a patch of bracken. The deeper I went, the more the cadences telegraphed in my mind, carving themselves into my skull. With each repetition, I felt an unseen presence, maybe dozens, watching me. I gripped my rifle tighter, prying my eyes from the swirling bark patterns that seemed to twist into shapes that weren't quite trees. After a half-mile, I reached a clearing. The ground opened into a natural amphitheater, ringed by cedars that bowed inward, their limbs interlocking like ribs. At its center was a circle of stones, 6 in total, arranged roughly equidistant, each about 3 feet tall. The stones glowed faintly with moss that seemed to undulate as if breathing. I recognized carvings from the head of one, symbols matching the ones scrawled in the missing hikers' notebooks, 3 rising lines, a crossbar, 2 descending lines, the same melody and shape. I swallowed, uneasy. My training told me stone rings were often used by indigenous peoples for ceremonies, but none here. I stepped forward, rifle swung to my hip, and knelt by the nearest pillar. The surface was smooth basalt, carved eons ago, now worn by weather. But the symbols were fresh, as though someone etched them hours ago. I reached out and brushed them. The ridges felt almost sticky, like sap from a tree. Then I felt the earth beneath me tremble. The whispering rose in intensity, the notes looping faster, echoing off the stones. I stumbled back, rifle clattering to the ground, and realized with a lurch that the circle might be a seal, not a monument, holding something beneath. The grove seemed alive, the trees leaning further inward, bending over me in unnatural angles, blocking out the sky entirely. A gust of wind cut through the clearing, cold and sudden. Leaves ripped from branches swirled around me, scattering like disturbed ashes. I heard a snap behind me, like a fallen cedar limb, but no sound of wood hitting ground. I spun. Nothing but a gap in the trees, where a figure stood between the trunks. A man soaked head to toe, face drained of color, wearing a ranger uniform identical to mine, but with skin so pale it looked translucent. He held in his hand a journal, pages fluttering in the wind. He whispered, "Help us." The words floated on the wind, more felt than heard. His eyes were empty holes, blackness swimming in pale sockets. My heart pounded. Who are you?" I managed. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, and the earth beneath his feet cracked. Roots snaked upward, curling around his ankles, tensing like muscle until his legs were immobile. His lips twisted into a sad smile. Then the tremor intensified. The circle of stones vibrated, humming on its axle. And within each crack between the stones, I saw movement, shadows pooling, thick like oil, coalescing into shapes that slithered across the ground like serpents of smoke. I backed away, calling, "Nolan, help me," but no one answered. The pale ranger dropped the journal, and it skittered toward me, pages rustling a warning. Then his body bucked as the roots tightened further, cracking bone, crushing him into the earth. He let out a faint croak, then was still. My rib cage ached as I exhaled, sweat pouring down my face. I scooped up the journal and fled the clearing, bursts of panic propelling me through the thorny undergrowth. The whispering melody trailed behind, the siren song urging me to stay. I stumbled, clawed at the cedars, and finally burst back onto Pine Hollow Trail. My breathing was ragged, my eyes stung with tears. I didn't stop until I reached a stream bed where I splashed cold water on my face. The rhythm of the rippling creek soothed me momentarily. I glanced toward the deeper woods. The circle and the pale ranger were gone, just cedars bowing in silent rows. I realized I had no proof of what I'd seen, no photos, no video, just the journal tucked in my pack. I flipped open the journal. On the first page, in neat, unfamiliar handwriting, was an entry dated 2 days prior. I arrived in Cedar Flats with hope. Some say this place is sacred. Others say it's cursed. The cedars hold voices, ancient guardians or vengeful spirits. No one knows. They say if you venture into the grove at midnight, you can hear the forest heart. But beware, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. I must find the ring of stones. I must unlock their power. Below it, a hastily scrawled warning, smeared with tears or blood. The seal is broken. They are waking. Light fades here. The watchers are hungry. My hands trembled as I read. I realized that journal belonged to Brooke, the ranger who vanished 3 nights ago. The pale figure must have been his specter. My stomach knotted with guilt. I'd gone after him when he needed help, but instead I drove him deeper into whatever malevolent power lay beneath the grove. Back at the station, I locked the door, dropped to the cot, and tried to rest. But sleep wouldn't come. I lay listening to the radio, static, tick, static, nothing. The cedar limbs scratched against the window frames, producing the same whispered melody now etched in my mind. At 2:13 a.m., I heard a knock at the door. My rifle was on the other side of the cabin. My heart hammered. I picked up the heavy iron candlestick and crept to the door, light spilling onto the wooden walls. The knock came again. 3 slow raps, a pause, 2 quick taps. The pattern matched the melody I'd heard. 3 rising beats, hold, 2 falling beats. I forced myself to open the door an inch. The porch light cast a cone of yellow through the gloom. At its edge stood a woman's hand, pale, slender, her fingernails curling into sharp points. I yanked the door closed. The knock continued, louder, angrier. "Who's there?" I demanded. No answer. Only the scratching of nails against wood. The next blow cracked the door frame. Splinters exploded, and I reeled back. I grabbed my rifle and flung the door open. The porch was empty. Just moonlit fog drifting in from the flats. No footprints, no sign of anything or anyone. I slammed the door shut, bolted all locks, and backed into the far corner of the cabin. The knocking turned to slamming. The door shook as if something immense was trying to break in. I pressed my back against the wall, fingers on the desk drawer where I kept pepper spray and a flare. The floorboards buckled under a heavy step. Then another, and another. The cabin groaned. Then, for a moment, silence. I dared to breathe, but the whispering resumed, louder than ever, a chorus of voices just beyond the walls chanting my name in that odd melody. The room temperature plummeted. My breath turned to mist. Suddenly, the bedroom window shattered inward. Glass rained down. Through the hole I glimpsed a shape, a man knee-high in moss, face obscured by shadow, but eyes glowing amber. He held out a hand as if reaching for me. The whispers crescendoed, 312, until they felt like knives in my skull. I scrambled across the floor, grabbed my rifle, and fired blindly at the window. The figure yelped, a sound like dead leaves skittering across stones, and retreated into the woods. Shards of glass tinkled around my feet. The whispers cut off instantly, replaced by a deafening silence. I knelt by the broken window, peered out. The cedars on the far edge of the clearing stood rigid, unmoving, as if waiting for instructions. One by one, I saw more shapes emerge from the gloom. Rangers, past and present, faces twisted, eyes wild. They stood among the trees, just beyond flashlight range, watching me. I realized with horror that they had gathered. All of them, the woman who disappeared first, Brooke, Nolan, or what was left of him, all silent still, their eyes fixed on the cabin. And behind them, deeper in the grove, the ring of stones pulsed faintly, as if alive. I backed away, heart thudding. My mind raced, stay and fight, or flee and call for backup. But if I fled, I'd lead the watchers to the station, and more would vanish. If I stayed, I might become the next to join their ranks. I weighed my options as the shapes scraped closer. I grabbed my rifle, kicked open the door, and ran toward the storage shed where the old Ranger truck sat, half buried by vines. The engine might still turn. I raced across the clearing, leaving a trail of splintered wood behind me, and slipped into the truck's cab. Gravity pressed on me as I threw the key in the ignition. It groaned, coughed, and finally roared to life. I spun the wheel toward the service road, but abruptly halted because just beyond the truck's headlights, blocking the dirt road, stood a massive cedar hand, its fingers gnarled and bark split, crushing a fence post. It lurched forward, stepping off the ground and knocking rocks in all directions. The earth trembled beneath me. I shifted into reverse and backed up, then slammed into something. Something soft and cold. I leaped from the truck. Beneath the headlights lay Nolan, or what I thought was Nolan. Eyes rolled back, blood trickling from his mouth, his body contorted at an impossible angle. He lifted his head and whispered my name. Slowly, the corners of his mouth creaked into a grin that ended in a bone crack. Then his head lolled to one side. The engine sputtered and died. I scrambled back into the cab, locked the doors, and trembled. Outside, the watchers advanced, Nolan's body stiffening, Brooke's pale face glinting in the beam, that woman swaying from side to side like a dead doll. They walked through the clearing toward me in a loose circle. Behind them, the cedars parted as more hands emerged from the ground, vines and roots writhing like serpents. I realized the watchers weren't just once living rangers. They become part of the forest itself, puppets animated by whatever power the grove contained. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't stay. I stomped on the accelerator. The truck lurched backward, tires spinning in mud. The watchers lunged, arms outstretched. I felt the brush of cold flesh on the bumper as I shifted into drive and floored it. The truck fishtailed, rock flew under the wheels, and I barreled down the service road, engine screaming. Behind me, I heard the snap of wood and the crack of cedar trunks splitting, a chorus of groaning bark. I glimpsed shapes breaking from the tree lean, chasing after me on twisted limbs. Branches whipped across my windshield, cracking the glass. The road pitched downward steeply, and I gained speed. The station shrank in my rearview mirror. I steered with one hand, heart pounding, adrenaline flooding. Then a nothing. The trees receded. The dirt road leveled out. Morning sun glinted through pines as I crested a small rise. I stared, stunned. The station and the grove lay behind, obscured by rolling hills. When I glanced at the dashboard, my speed read 45, but the world felt still, like I'd passed through a veil into a normal morning. I pulled over, hands shaking. The radio crackled to life. Chase? Ranger Chase? Are you there? We lost signal. What's your status? It was dispatch. Relief and dread washed over me at once. I cleared my throat. Dispatch, this is Ranger Chase. I'm returning to base. We had a situation. Multiple missing, possible fatalities. Request immediate backup at Cedar Flats Ranger Station. Copy, Ranger. We'll send a helicopter. ETA 6 hours. Helicopter. Civilization. I exhaled, reaching out to steady myself. The whispering melody still echoed faintly in my mind, like a tickle behind my eyes. But the forest beyond the service road looked normal. No looming cedars, no watchers. I started the engine again and drove on, not daring to glance back. I never returned to Cedar Flats. 4 search parties went in: rangers, firefighters, canine units, then a National Guard aerial survey. They found the station burned to the ground, charred timbers, melted radio equipment, no bodies. The ring of stones in the grove was gone, replaced by a deep sinkhole filled with stagnant water and driftwood. The cedar trunks that once formed a perfect circle around the clearing were toppled. The only trace of the horror I witnessed was a single journal, Brooks, found torn and blood-stained near the sinkhole. The last entry read, "It feeds on memory. It binds your soul to the cedars. You cannot escape once you hear the song. The watchers are hungry. The seal is broken. Pray the wind carries my voice away." They closed Cedar Flats permanently. A hazard zone sign hangs now at the trailhead. Forest Service warns hikers to steer clear, citing unstable ground and dangerous wildlife. But I know the truth. Cedar Flats is a living entity, an ancient ravenous spirit that preys on lost souls, weaving them into its choir of whispers. And even now, late at night, I still wake to the echo of that melody. 3 rising notes, a held chord, 2 falling tones, calling me back to the grove. I left my ranger's badge behind in the cabin. Some nights, I wonder if I should have taken it with me, so it could be used as a warning. But I kept one remnant, Brooks' journal, its pages preserved in my desk drawer. I read it when the nightmares begin, and I remember that some places are not meant for the living, where the trees hold memories no human should possess, where the forest's hunger never sleeps, and where, if you listen closely, you will always hear the whispers in the Cedar Flats. I'd heard rumors about Silver Pines Lake for years, that the reflection on its still surface wasn't yours but someone else's, that hikers who ventured to the North Shore never returned, that on stormy nights the pine trees surrounding the lake would wail in human voices. I dismissed it all, just more campfire lore and tall tales to scare newcomers. As a seasoned park ranger, I'd spent nights tracking mountain lions and rescuing hypothermic backpackers. I'd learned to fear bears, avalanches, lightning, but I never feared myths. So when they assigned me to Silver Pines District, I expected routine. Check cabins, patrol trails, assist boaters. I had no idea I was walking into a nightmare trapped between reflection and reality, a lake that devours echoes, a forest that replication breeds, and a darkness that weaves your own voice into its web. Over the next 3 weeks, I discovered the chilling truth. Silver Pines Lake was not an innocuous glacial body of water, but a mirror that refused to reflect the living, and a force that twisted the dead into echoes begging to be free. This is my account. 5 nights of dread, each darker than the one before, of the terror I faced at Silver Pines Lake. The district office was perched on a bluff overlooking the southern end of Silver Pines Lake. Built in 1958, it was a sturdy brick structure with wide windows, a metal roof, and a flagpole out front that creaked in the wind. When I arrived on a crisp September morning, the lake lay like glass, mist curling from its surface in the early sun. A ring of pines, towering, skeletal, framed the water's edge. Their needles whispered in the breeze, sounding almost like distant voices. I parked the pickup, grabbed the general order binder, and introduced myself to Sergeant Callahan, the chief ranger. He was a tall man with a weather-beaten face, silver temples, and eyes sharp as flint. "So you're the new bee," he said, extending a firm handshake. "Silver Pines has a way of testing people. Stay alert." He led me inside and showed me the logbook. Dozens of reports of missing hikers, strange reflections, unexplained fires, and calls of help me on the ranger radio. But nothing concrete, just scribbles from rookies terrified by shadows in the tree lean. I shrugged it off. By midday, I was on foot patrol along the East Trail, a 6-mile loop skirting the lake. I checked the rental cabins, vacant for the season, then hiked out to the Ranger Lookout Tower 1,500 feet above the water. From there, I could see the lake's entire expanse, nearly 1,000 acres of cobalt water, ringed by granite cliffs and more pines. The only break in the forest was the north shore, where a trail zigzagged down to a boat launch platform. That's where the folklore said people vanished. I studied the shoreline with binoculars, searching for clues, overturned kayaks, boot prints, anything. But the beach was empty. I felt a sudden chill, a chill out of place in September. I snapped my head around. The pines whispered differently, like a low moaning, almost human. I shook it off and began the descent. 3 days later, around 2 p.m., I received a call from a day hiker. I think my friend went into the woods, and he never came back. I grabbed my radio strapped on the day pack and took the Ranger ATV to the North Shore parking lot, gravel crunching beneath me, a caw of a raven overhead. A young couple stood by the edge of the water, panic in their eyes. The man was tall, athletic, wearing a backpack. The woman's cheeks were pale. "Her name's Marisol." She wandered off, trying to find a photogenic spot, the man stuttered. "She wanted to capture the sunrise on the rocks. But it's been 2 hours. I called her name. Nothing." I nodded, jotting details. "I'll look." She might have slipped or gotten disoriented. I set out up the North Shore Trail. The air was crisp, the pines thickening around me. Leaves crunched underfoot, and the lake's breath hissed below. I called, "Marisol Harris." The echoes vanished into the treetops. I followed the narrow trail to a rocky point overlooking a small alcove, a perfect sunrise vantage. Her backpack lay next to the edge, half open, camera gear strewn. I lifted the camera. Lens cracked, tripod toppled. I looked where her camera faced the lake. The water was still, perfectly still. I felt a tug. A reflection flickered at the periphery, a woman's face. I blinked. The reflection vanished. I leaned over the edge, scanning the woods opposite. The shadows between the pines were too deep, like someone crouched there half hidden. I called, louder this time, "Marisol." The beam of my flashlight was barely needed in daylight. I heard nothing but the wind through needles. I checked my watch, 2:07 p.m. Then I heard it, a faint splash. I turned. Nothing on the water, no ripples. I dropped to my knees and peered into the alcove's shallow depths. The stones were slick with algae, but no footprints, no sign of struggle. Only the backpack. My pulse hammered. I radioed dispatch, missing hiker at North Shore. Searching 100-meter radius. Over. Static. All units busy. Stand by. I grabbed my climbing rope, clipped on my harness, and rappelled down to the alcove. The rock face was wet, mossy. Bits of shattered granite crumbled under my feet. I called her name again, heart catching. I reached the alcove floor. The water lapped softly. I shone my headlamp beneath the surface. Brown rocks and green algae, no body. I waded in careful. The water was ice cold. I scooped my hand through it, feeling nothing but muck. Then I stood and realized I couldn't hear my own footsteps. The forest was silent. Even birds refused to chirp. The only sound was the lake and that faint breath like someone exhaling underwater. I caught movement in my peripheral vision, a shape on the far side of the alcove. I spun. Nothing. But as I turned back, I saw a woman's reflection in the lake's mirrored surface, just an inch from my face. I staggered back, stumbling into the trees. By the time I peered again, it was gone. Panicked, I scrambled up to the trailhead. Halfway up, I felt a hand on my shoulder, ice-cold grip. I whirled, flashlight flaring into the face of Marisol. But her eyes were empty black pits. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound emerged. Something surged through me, a gut punch of terror. Then she vanished, leaving only the scent of wet pine and rot. I fled the alcove, running blind. The way back up the cliff was treacherous. My foot slipped on moss, and I tumbled 10 feet, slamming my shoulder into the rocks. I grunted in agony, but scrambled to my feet and clawed upward. When I reached the trailhead, Nolan, the canine handler, rushed toward me, yelling my name. I collapsed against him, gasping, terrified. Within minutes, we organized a full search. Hikers in the parking lot vanished from their cars. Flashlights flickered on the tree line. The forest groaned with unseen agitation. As the sun sank, the canyon filled with dusk shadows. We found no trace of Marisol or the others. Only the cracked camera and that swirling reflection I couldn't shake. That night, I barely slept. I listened to the radio in my cabin. Updates, missing 2 hikers. 1 ranger. The wind rattled the windows, and I swore I could hear soft chanting, like dozens of people chanting her name in unison. I whispered a promise. I will find you, no matter what. Over the next 2 days, I surveyed every inch of shoreline with the rangers, escorted by bloodhounds and drones. At first light on the 3rd day, I ventured out alone on the lake in the park's old aluminum rowboat, hoping the water might reveal something missed on land. The surface was glass, no ripples, just infinite dark green expanse. I drifted toward the center of the lake, scanning the tree line with binoculars. But on the far shore, the pines bent inward as if bowing to something unseen. The silence was suffocating. As I floated, I heard it, a distant wailing, low and resonant, echoing across the water. It grew in pitch like a chorus rising in unison. Then it multiplied until it felt like the entire forest was singing a dirge. I gripped the oars, trying to row back, but my arms felt like lead. The boat barely budged. The wailing rose to a crescendo, piercing chords that felt like shards of glass in my ears. I tensed, white knuckles on the oars, and the wailing cut off as one. In the silence, I heard a different sound, a whisper, like an urgent breath. Turn around. I scanned the horizon. Nothing moved, only the ring of pines standing guard. Slowly, I rotated in the boat and shone my flashlight across the water. The beam landed on a small rocky island I'd never noticed on any map, a knoll of boulder and brush about 200 yards away. On that island, I saw 3 figures standing in a row, backlit by pale moonlight: Marisol, Nolan, and a third person, someone hugging themselves, hair matted. Their eyes glowed like coals. Gasped. Before I could react, a wave rocked the boat as if something brushed its side, though the water was still. Then the figures lifted their heads in unison, staring at me with empty eyes. The island trembled, and the pines seemed to groan. My breathing quickened, my pulse hammered. I rowed with a frantic strength I didn't know I had, desperate to put distance between us. Beneath the boat, the water sloshed strangely, like ripples against an invisible wall. I reached shore gasping, spit flying from my mouth. I ran up the bank, stumbling over rocks and fallen logs. The forest around me was unnervingly still. I reached the rowboat launch and bolted for my ATV, tearing down the shore road with tires spinning. Only when I reached the ranger station did I realize my hands were stained with lake water. I locked myself in my cabin. My radio crackled. Chase, status? Over. I forced a calm voice. I'm okay. I'll need a med check for sprained shoulder, but I saw the Marisol Nolan on the island. They didn't look alive. Silence. Then Roger. We're sending medics and a team at dawn. Stay put, Chase. Over. Dawn felt too far away. I paced, rereading Brooks' journal from Cedar Flats a month back, my mind racing. I scribbled patterns in a notebook: 3 rising lines, 1 hold, 2 falling. The same melody etched in my mind that haunted my sleep. I realized that Silver Pines Lake didn't just swallow bodies. It swallowed echoes of life, forcing them back as ghosts that lured others to join them. The water was a mirror of the dead, reflecting their unrest. As dusk approached, I felt a presence in the cabin, like someone watching my every move. The wind rattled the window panes, and outside, the pines began their mournful wail again. I gripped the sides of my desk, knuckles white, and remembered the stories. If the wailing got close, you'd see your reflection in the water, then you'd vanish. I glanced at the lake below, calm, full moon reflecting emerald needles. I took a deep breath and cursed myself for being a loner. At first light, medics and a full search team assembled on the shore. I led them toward the boat launch. The island was only reachable by water. I volunteered to row. Though my shoulder throbbed, I gripped the oars, scanning the surface. The dawn mist hovered just above the lake, swirling around me like sentient spirits. I arrived at the island without incident, save for goosebumps racing along my arms. The rocky ground was slick with dew. The pines on the island were even taller than on the mainland, their roots weaving through the boulders like serpents. Our flashlights illuminated a narrow path leading to a small clearing at the center. I felt my jaw clench at the sight. 3 shallow graves, each just large enough to hold a human body. Fresh dirt had been disturbed, and Warden Hernandez's metal detector beeped when he scanned around one grave. We knelt and discovered clothing. Nolan's ranger uniform, tattered, and one of Marisol's pink socks. No bodies. The graves were empty. We combed the island, calling names, shining beams into every shadow. I climbed to a vantage boulder and surveyed the lake's mirror-like surface. No reflections, only my own looking back. I felt a surge of dread. Where were the bodies? The water wasn't reflecting them because they weren't dead yet. They were still trapped below the surface, my searching mind. Behind me, I heard footsteps. I turned and saw a shape stepping from the pine shadows, a tall woman in gray ranger attire I didn't recognize. Her hair was drooping like seaweed. Tears streaked her cheeks. "Please help us," she whispered, voice hollow as wind through dead branches. I blinked. It was Marisol. But this was an echo. Her face devoid of warmth, her eyes glazed. Instinctively, I raised my rifle. The minute it clicked, she winced, as if I had physically hurt her. She took a hesitant step back, head tilting in confusion, then collapsed to the ground. When we approached, her body dissolved, turning to mist that drifted into the pines. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. The team circled around me, confusion etched on their faces. "I saw her," I said. "She was here, an echo. We need to leave." They conferred quietly. Hernandez frowned. "We'll pack up and head back." The others murmured agreement. Before we could react, the wind turned frigid. The pines began to wail in unison, a low, mournful drone that grew until it felt like the sky would shatter. The clearing darkened as heavy clouds amassed overhead. I pointed toward the lake. "Get to the boat." Now. We raced back toward the shore, but the ground beneath us trembled. The pine's roots trellised around our boots, ripping chunks of dirt. The earth gaped as though swallowing us whole. I sprinted ahead, grabbing Nolan's limp body, now drained of all life or what passed for it, and vaulted into the boat. The others followed, pushing off as the forest groaned behind them. I rode with all my strength, muscles burning. The pines on the island seemed to lean over the water, their topmost limbs curling downward like skeletal fingers. The island's reflection shimmered, distorting into nightmarish shapes. I thought I saw Marisol's face form in the waves, screaming silently. Then the wailing crescendoed and abruptly cut off. The fog thickened, enveloping us. I rode harder, but my hands ached. We reached the far shore gasping, collapsed on the sand. When I looked back, the island was gone, just the lake's glassy surface reflecting the pines beyond. I never wanted to return to the island. Several days passed as we searched the forest's edges. We discovered severed tree roots, melted snow patches in odd shapes, and dozens of empty graves near the north shore, like ghost cemeteries scattered by the wind. Bloodhounds refused to track anything deeper than 50 feet from the lake. The forest itself seemed to repel us. Each night I dreamed of that reflection, Marisol's face peering from the depths, her eyes begging me to join them. I awoke gasping, drenched in sweat. When I sat up, I saw Marisol's soaked footprints on the back door's threshold, though no rain had fallen and the door had been locked. I pressed my ear to the door. Wind? No. A soft chant, "Join us," murmured through the cracks. I slammed the door shut. On my final night, I made a plan. Sunrise, I'd set out alone for the lake, drag a mirror, one of the old signal mirrors, across the surface and record what lay beneath. If I could capture the reflection of the echoes, force them into the open, I might break whatever hold the lake had. I weighed the radio in my hand. If I don't report back by noon, consider me missing. Send a full extraction team. At 5:45 a.m., I climb into the boat at North Shore, the sky bruised purple, mist rolling off the water. My heart drummed. At exactly 6 a.m. sunrise, I dipped the signal mirror into the water's surface. The reflection rippled. I propped the mirror on my lap and kept it steady as the dawn light hit its glass. The lake's surface appeared to shimmer. My reflection flickered, eyes wide, then shifted. In the mirror, I saw not my own face, but Marisol's, Nolan's, a dozen other faces, some smiling, some screaming, some weeping. They stared back at me, urgent, their mouths moving in silent pleas. My breath hitched. I extended the mirror farther so I could see both reflection and what lay beneath, a swirl of murky depths like black oil seething. Suddenly, one face reached out from the mirror, pressing against the glass from the inside as if it meant to break free. I jerked my hand. The mirror fell from the boat, shattering into countless shards. The surface exploded outward. I leaped back as three shapes burst from the lake. A woman in a pink dress, Marisol, Nolan in uniform, and the pale ranger from Cedar Flats, Brooke. They floated on the surface, limbs limp, faces twisted in hunger. I fired my rifle, but shots rang hollow on the water, making ripples, but never striking flesh. They drifted toward me, tendrils of black water swirling around their ankles. The boat rocked violently. I stood, pulling up the oars. "Get away from me," I yelled. Nolan's eyes locked on mine, black holes rimmed with crimson. He smiled, showing teeth too many, too sharp. He reached for me. I slammed the boat in reverse, plowing through the waves. Behind me, I heard their wails, like a choir of broken things singing a funeral hymn. I rowed until the shore rushed to meet me. The wind whipped at my uniform, foam sprayed the boat. When I reached land, I leaped out and collapsed on the shore. My radio trembled, lights flickering. Chase? Chase. Status? Over. I hit the transmit. Urgent. Evacuate immediate. Static. Then silence. The forest around me was empty. No echoes, no wailing. Just the cold September air and a bloodhound whimpering near the boat's edge. When the extraction team arrived at 8:30, I motioned them away from the water. We returned to the station. I handed over my resignation. I refused to discuss details beyond "we found no bodies, no trace of missing hikers." Weeks later, they drained Silver Pines Lake for maintenance, repairing a cracked dam leak. The water level dropped, revealing half-submerged trees, muddy banks littered with debris. The team found dozens of worn journals, torn clothing, scattered bones, and more than 50 homemade mirrors broken near the shore. When they reached the island, half visible now, they found shattered stones and two new carvings on the tallest rock, three upward grooves, one horizontal slash, two downward gouges. Ominously, the carvings glowed faintly in the damp September mornings. They sealed the area and posted warnings, "Do not return." The rumor mill churned with stories of the lake's thirst and the forest's whispers. For me, the nightmares never stopped. At home, I see my reflection in windows at night, and sometimes, for a heartbeat, I glimpse the faces of the lost, pressing out, wanting in. The echo remains, clawing at the edges of my mind. I no longer wear my ranger badge, but every dawn I wake to the memory of that lake, its black mirror, the echoing wails, and the knowledge that once you look into Silver Pines Lake, it never stops looking back. I was the youngest park ranger in Silverwood County, and the moment I was promoted to midnight shift at Raven's Perch Fire Watch Tower, my coworkers treated me like I'd won an honor prize. The tower, perched 2,200 feet above the valley floor, was the last line of defense for a forest renowned for wildfires. All summer, rangers rotated in pairs, scanning the horizon for smoke. But as autumn descended, the rotations dwindled until I was left alone for weeks. Just me, the wind, and the creaking radio. On my first night alone, a distant howl echoed like a wolf's, yet no wolves lived within 50 miles. I spied a flicker, smoke on the horizon, but it vanished before I could radio in. Then I heard voices speaking my name from below the tower, soft, urgent, though no one had been in the forest in days. Over the next fortnight, I learned that Raven's Perch held more than bird's-eye views. It held echoes of those who died in the fire of 72, shadows of lost souls seeking release, and a malevolent presence that fed on fear. Each night, I discovered I wasn't truly alone. The midnight forest crept into my mind, unraveling reality as I knew it. This is the chronicle of 10 nights I spent at Raven's Perch, 10 nights of isolation, terror, and a final dawn I nearly didn't survive. When I arrived at Raven's Perch Ranger Station in early October, the aspen groves were turning gold, and the air smelled of smoke from distant controlled burns. The station was a modest cabin at the base of a narrow service road. The ranger before me, a grizzled veteran named Cormac, handed me the keys without a word. "Tower's yours until further notice," he said, then vanished down the road. Inside the cabin, I found a map of the Perch Loop, emergency flares, a wood stove, and a spiral-bound logbook. The tower itself stood a mile uphill, a wooden structure 2 stories tall, accessible by rickety steps carved in granite. I hoisted my pack robe, food, water, binoculars, and an old revolver Cormac had given me just in case. The climb took an hour. Loose spree, brambles, the scent of pine resin heavy in the crisp air. By noon, I reached the tower, heart hammering, exhilarated by the view. The valley stretched out below, patchwork of pines, aspen, and meadows. Inside the tower was Spartan, a desk perched by a wraparound window, a coil bed mattress, a wood crate of firewood, and a radio transmitter. No electricity, lights were kerosene lamps and battery-powered lanterns. I set up my station, noted the date October 2nd, and made my first log entry. Beautiful day. No smoke. Clear horizon. Night watch begins in 3 hours. As dusk fell around 6 p.m., I climbed the rickety stairs to the observation deck, the sun a blood-orange orb dipping behind the western ridge. I lit a lantern, patted down my revolver in its holster, and activated the radio. Raven's Perch standing watch, shift start. The hand crackled. Okay, Chase. We'll check in at midnight. Good luck. With that, I was alone. Around 9:30 p.m., the forest settled into silence. Except for the wind's sigh through the pines, there was nothing, until far off in the east, I saw faint flickers on the horizon. Smoke? I grabbed my binoculars. The light danced like embers in a graveyard, too low for a forest fire, too transient for car headlights. I radioed base, Control, this is Perch. I'm seeing flickers in east 10 o'clock position, 5 miles out. Possibly fire. Static. Perm. Perch? Over. No response. I tapped the microphone. Nothing but a low whine. I descended to floor level and grabbed my flashlight, shining it out the window. No one in the valley. I returned to the desk and scribbled 9:32 p.m., possible spark or reflection. I stared through the window as the last glow faded. Once the lights died, I heard it soft, urgent, like a breath whispering my name. Chase. Chase. I froze, heart pounding. The whisper came from below, not from the tower itself, like the forest was calling me. I swung the flashlight onto the ground. The tree line was pitch black. The only sound was my own breathing and a faint rustle of leaves at the edge of my vision. Hello, I called. No answer. I tapped the stairs. Cormac, is that you? Only the forest sighed in return. The wind died, and complete silence pressed in. I felt a prick at the back of my neck. The hairs on my arms bristled. The forest wasn't just watching, it was listening. I returned to the desk, closed every window shutter, and locked the door. The whispering stopped. I sat on the mattress, trying to steady my breathing. Eventually, I drifted off into a fitful sleep, filled with dreams of pines turning into men with ash-black eyes. Night 2 began worse. At around 10:13 p.m., I heard heavy footsteps on the wooden walkway outside, a deliberate, rhythmic pace around the tower's perimeter. I grabbed my revolver and unbolted the door. Ray of flashlight cut through the darkness. The forest was still. No footprints near the tower's base, no broken branches, no sign of anyone. It was as if someone walked on air. I scanned the treetops. In a gap between pines, I saw a pale shape hunched, too still to be an animal. My throat went dry. I stepped onto the walkway, aiming my flashlight at the spot. The figure vanished. I felt the temperature drop 10 degrees. My breath formed a mist. I re-entered, bolted the door, and locked all windows again, feeling watched. At midnight, I tried to radio base. Midnight check-in Perch. No activity. Click, then Control, Perch, come in. Over. Relief flooded me. I read the reply, then added quietly, there are footsteps around the tower, no one here. Silence. Then stand by. Over. I waited. Static. Moments later, I heard a knock on the inside of the metal radio panel. like someone tapping. I snapped the radio off. The radio panel's faceplate was cold to the touch, but the knock continued. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps. The same pattern, 3-1-2. The melody formed itself in my mind. I pressed a hand to my ear, listening as it traveled through the walls. Suddenly, a gust ripped through the tower, extinguishing my lanterns. I was plunged into darkness. The wind howled beneath me, and the tower groaned. I flicked on my headlamp. On the floor lay a scrap of black cloth, like charred silk, bearing a single emblem, a raven feather draped over a noose. I recognized it from old station records as a symbol used by watchmen during the 1972 fires. The last letter Cormac wrote spoke of hunters who slayed those who fled the fire's edge. I shivered, grazing my hand over the cloth. The whispering returned, "Don't leave, stay with us." It felt inside my skull. I ground my teeth, closed the shutters, and climbed to the desk, ignoring the draft, trying to stay focused. Eventually, exhaustion overtook me, and I slept fitfully, resolving to pack up at first light. At dawn, I descended to the station cabin and poured coffee. I pored over 1972 fire reports. A conflagration in Raven's Perch had claimed 5 rangers, 3 missing, 2 charred beyond recognition. Local legends said they never died but remained in the tower, their spirits searching for replacements. Cormac's logs scratched in the margins. The watchers beneath the pines keep calling. They search for lost souls. Keep moving, keep awake. That afternoon, I called a local historian, Ms. Alder, for insight. Over the phone, she told me the fires burned through here in September 72. 3 rangers posted at Perch vanished without a trace. One day they answered every radio call. The next morning, their bodies never found. Some say they walked into the flames. Others say the forest itself consumed them. Every subsequent ranger reported whispers, voices calling, phantom footsteps. They left in weeks, some months. It's like Perch never let them go. I thanked her and returned to the tower, uneasy. Gray clouds threatened rain. By dusk, I heard again the faint flicker, smoke but no fire on the western ridge. I rushed to the window. The cinders danced like dying embers. I radioed base, fire watch, possible flare-up. Please investigate. Control replied, acknowledged. Sending chopper at 0700. I felt eyes on me. I scanned the lookout. Nothing but infinite pines. The wind shifted. I heard a woman's laughter, childish, mocking. It echoed around me. I frowned, waiting. No one should be up here. I scribbled in my log, October 5th, 6:45 p.m., second night activity, phantom smoke, laughter. Tower secure. That night, the footsteps returned, hammering metal on wood, like someone pacing inside a mine. But the tower's floorboards were clear. I counted them, 6 steps ascending, 2 at the top, each sequence followed by a pause, then repeating. Unnerving. I clutched my revolver, careful to stay silent. At midnight, when I tried to radio the station, the panel sparked, the lights flared, and a voice hissed through static, "Join us, stay with us," then silence. The whispering rose from every direction, beneath my feet, through the radio wires, wrapping around me like a fog. I grabbed my hatchet, knocked out lantern prisms, and rebuilt them. My hands trembled. Before dawn, I lit a fire in the stove to keep myself awake. I stare at the walls, seeing faces appear in the wood, scorched, charred, crying out. I jolted upright, expecting someone to appear at the window. No one. The sun finally rose, and I felt I'd barely survived the night. On night 3, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed the tower, lightning split the sky. The wind wailed like a wounded animal. At 8:19 p.m., I spotted actual smoke rising from the southern ridge, thick orange flames licking at the rim. I radioed urgent. Control, actual fire, southern ridge, 2 miles out. We have an active blaze. Send helicopter now. The wind swallowed my words. I repeated. At last, Control responded, affirmative. ETA 10 minutes. I breathed a sigh of relief. But the forest had other plans. As I manned the binoculars, I heard scratching on the roof, heavy clumps hitting shingles. I paused, focusing on the fire. The chopper's thrum reached me. Suddenly, the storm's roar twisted. The smoke on the ridge collapsed inward as the fire plume reversed. Black smoke sucked back down. The flames vanished. The wind turned icy, each breath like shards of glass. I spun around. On the stairs behind me stood a figure, a man in scorched uniform, chest singed, face halfway melted, eyes hollow. He reached out and said, "No, Rasp, my name." I dropped the binoculars, stepping back. When the lightning flickered, he was gone. My heart thundered. Then the lightning struck a cedar, cracking it in half, and the tower shuddered. Water poured through gaps in the roof. I lunged to shut shutters. The radio sparked and died. Lanterns went out. Darkness fell, heavier than ever. I gathered supplies, emergency rations, extra fuel, first aid kit, and ready to descend. The stairs were slick with rain. The phone kit Cormac left rattled in my pack. I pulled it out. No signal. I steadied my breathing, gripped the handrails, and climbed down. Each step groaned, as if the tower were alive beneath me. When I reached the forest floor, the wind abated. The rain slackened to a drizzle. In the torchlight, I saw footprints, not mine, leading down the service road. They were single file, booted, too big for me. I followed them a quarter mile until I came upon the fire line, scorched ground but no blaze. Then I heard a woman sob from the forest. "Help me. Please help me." I dashed toward it, branches whipping my face. I stumbled on what felt like a body. Flashlight beam revealed Marisol's form, face bruised, dress torn. She lay at the base of a tree, shaking, eyes wild. I knelt beside her. "Marisol, are you alive?" She didn't respond. When I touched her shoulder, she jerked away, staring at me with emptier eyes. A howl rose from deeper in the forest, primal, echoing off the trunks. The ground trembled. One heartbeat later, a wolf massive, fur black as night, eyes aglow, lunged from the shadows. It stopped a few yards away, head low watching me. The storm had passed. Moonlight now glinted on the wet forest floor. The wolf let out a low growl. I raised my revolver. The wolf didn't flinch. Something in its eyes told me it wasn't an animal. Before I could fire, the wolf's face contorted, flesh bunched and stretched. Its muzzle elongated into a human skull, teeth gnashing. It shifted, limbs elongating, metamorphosing into a charred ranger's body wearing a scorched uniform. I realized it was Cormac, the missing ranger whose last message warned me to stay safe. He or it raised a hand, his burned flesh peeling back as the smoky wind blew. His hollow eyes stared at me, and the forest seemed to ripple around him. Marisol rose from the ground behind him, whispering my name. Then Marisol's body dissolved into phantom mist. Cormac's charred skin sloughed off, revealing runic symbols etched into bone. I fired once, hitting bone. The creature didn't flinch. It opened its mouth. Its voice came out as a chorus. Children's laughter, screams, sobs. All at once, my ears rang. A wave of nausea hit me. I stumbled backward, dropping the revolver. Cormac's form dissolved into a swirl of ash and embers before being sucked into the trees. The wind gusted, and with one final whistle, all was still. I sprinted back to the tower, chest burning, reaching the stairs. Firelight flickered through windows. The fire on the ridge had returned, raging now, feeding on a gale that sprouted out of nowhere. The blaze not only burned the pines, but the tower's lower walls. I fumbled with the lock, yanked open the door, and stumbled inside. Flames licked the walls. Embers drifted down. I dropped my pack, booted my way up the stairs. The second floor door hung half off its hinges, the roof above buckling. I climbed the final ladder to the observation deck. The fire crackled at the base, climbing. The wind battered the tower, flickers of flame casting shadows that danced like demons. I searched for the flare kit in my pack. My hand shook as I found it, 3 flares. I lit one and kicked open the hatch, the ladder groaning as I climbed onto the roof. Smoke stung my eyes. Fire's heat pricked my skin. I fired the flare into the raging blaze on the ridge. Urgent signal for the chopper. But with the storm's fury, the fire spread too fast. The roar of wind and flame drowned out everything. I climbed down from the roof onto a lower platform, where the obsidian sky cracked with lightning. I thought I saw Cormac's charred figure standing at the forest's edge, beckoning me down. The forest burned in hues of orange and red. I stumbled into the flames, realizing I had no choice. I sprinted down the service road. Heat licked my calves. Ash rained on me like snow. Flame snakes erupted, blocking the path. I veered left into the pines, half blinded by smoke. My lungs burned. The chopper's rotor blades thundered overhead, too late. The fire was a beast consuming everything. I heard a woman's whisper behind me, "Join us, come home." I turned, heart in my throat. No one. I broke through the trees, finding a small pool fed by a spring. The water was ice cold. I plunged in, submerging myself as embers and cinders rained down. The flames recoiled from the water's edge. I sank to my knees, gasping. The chopper hovered overhead now, searchlights sweeping through smoke-bent pines. I waved both arms. Eventually, a cable dropped, and I was hoisted above the inferno. I survived Raven's Perch, but I never returned. Investigators found the tower's charred remains. Only a scorched plaque remained, Beacon of Watchers, 1972. They say no bodies were found, just ashes, embers, and that tattered cloth fragment bearing the raven feather and noose emblem. I left my ranger uniform hanging in a locker at the district office. I haven't slept since without waking to the whisper of flames, the echo of footsteps on wooden planks, or the vision of a charred ranger whispering my name. Sometimes I still see the howl of that wolfman amid the roar of wildfire and nightmares. Silverwood County closed Raven's Perch permanently. Ranger patrols now rely on drones. But late at night, I catch glimpses of smoke on distant ridges, long after any controlled burns. And I hear the pines whispering. I know the watchers at Raven's Perch still hunger for lost souls. I pray no one else hears their call or sees their charred forms beckoning from the embers. Before I became ranger in the Northwood River District, I'd spent years on Montana's backcountry. I was no stranger to danger, avalanche zones, flash floods, unseen bear tracks. But nothing prepared me for what awaited on Broken Oars Lake, a glacial tarn nestled in a ring of jagged peaks. Locals refused to go near it after dark. They swore the lake turned oil black at twilight, and that rowboats left untethered would drift toward the dammed inlet where the water gurgled like a throat. Some said if you stopped rowing at midnight, you'd never make it back. I snorted at the stories. When they assigned me to Northwood River, Broken Oars Lake was just another patrol point. I drove in on a crisp October morning, store-bought coffee in hand, ready to check the new canoe shack they'd built last summer. I had no clue that over the next 11 nights, I would confront a phenomenon older than the peaks themselves, a curse born of drowned souls, a water that devours sound, and a howl that beckons you to join it. By the final dawn, I would understand that the lake's calm surface hid something hungry, a reflection that wandered, and I would fight to reclaim my soul from the water's edge. I reached the ranger station, a small cabin of logs painted forest green, perched on the south shore of Broken Oars Lake at 11:45 a.m. The sky was crisp blue, the distant peaks already dusted with snow. Behind the station was a boathouse with half a dozen rowboats, paddles stacked in a rack. I checked the ledger. All boats accounted for. No rentals today. A red birch canoe sat on the launch ramp. The lake's surface was flat, mirroring the pines and mountains in perfect symmetry. I logged in as Ranger Eli Navarro, patrolling daily from 6 a.m. to midnight. The station had an old CRT monitor showing feeds from motion sensors at the inlet, where the river drained into the lake's basin. I scanned the camera. No movement. I noted the GPS coordinates, then walked down to the dock to inspect the boats. Each hull was intact or secured. I saw nothing unusual. No scratches, no footprints in powdery mud, just the soft whisper of lapping waves. As I inspected the final rowboat, I heard a faint drip. I paused. A small, narrow stream trickled from a stump near the boathouse, feeding the lake. But there was a second, softer sound, like water gurgling from below. I peer beneath the dock. Nothing but shadows. I finished my checks, hauled my life vest to the station, and decided to take a midday paddle, exercise, and fellowship with the lake. I carried my binoculars, first aid kit, and a handheld radio. At 12:30 p.m., I launched the canoe. The water tasted cold and clean. I rowed toward the eastern shore, scanning for wildlife, deer, elk, occasional moose track. 10 minutes in, I heard a slosh behind me. I turned, no one. I assumed a branch fell from a pine. I rowed further until I reached a narrow inlet nestled in the forest. Here, the water was darker, tinted mahogany by tannins from the swamp above. The inlet opened into boggy shallows tangled with brush and fallen logs. Curious, I guided the canoe into the inlet, despite warnings to avoid it. I spotted a rusted rowboat half submerged in muck, paddles missing. On its hull was carved a single word, drowned, a frown. Someone must have scrawled it as a joke. I heard a faint whistle, like wind through reed grass, but no wind. I scanned the inlet with binoculars. No movement. Yet I felt compelled to inch forward, my heart thudding. My oars struck roots beneath the surface. I paused, thinking of my training. Leather boots and padded jacket. The water here could drop you in a whirlpool in seconds. I turned to leave when I saw, in the canoe's reflection, something standing on the bank, a tall figure drenched, face obscured by wet hair. I snapped my head around. Nothing. The inlet's mouth rippled. I stared. The man reappeared, gray shirt clinging to his ribs, jeans torn. He raised his hand, pointing at me. My skin crawled. I raised my binoculars. The face was rotted, eyes empty, jaw slack. I backed the canoe with the oars. The figure took a step into the water. The water rose to his knees, then waist. He didn't struggle. His arms hung limp. He drifted toward me at an impossible pace. I paddled backward, oars slicing water. My radio crackled. Perch, this is Navarro, respond. The broadcast came from the station. Good. But I ignored it. The figure was nearly at the canoe's bow. I swung my oar at him. The wooden shaft splintered against nothing. But in his place, the canoe's reflection wavered, like a pebble dropped in the lake. My paddle struck water again. I rowed with frantic strength back toward the main lake. At the inlet's mouth, something grabbed the canoe's stern, cold, clammy hand. I spun, aiming to defend myself. The restless corpse lurched, head tilting. But as I advanced with the paddle raised, it vanished into the swirling tannin water, leaving only ripples. My heart pounded. I needed to get back. I reached the open water and crossed the lake in minutes, each stroke a struggle. When I put the canoe atop the rack and bolted the boathouse door, I realized my clothes were damp, yet I hadn't fallen in. I shook as I logged 12:45 p.m., corpse-like figure in inlet. No blood, no decomposition smell. Entity submerged before impact. Audio, faint whispers. Recommend investigating at night. That night, I sat at the station radio, eating stale crackers and sipping coffee. Clouds rolled in, making the lake black even before dusk. At 8:22 p.m., the camera at the inlet showed movement. I grabbed my flashlight, life vest, and revolver, then headed to the boathouse. The wind rattled the dock planks. I checked the inlet camera feed, a ripple, then darkness. I launched a rowboat under moonlight. The wooden hull creaked under my weight. I rowed toward the inlet, waves lapping softly. The edge of the inlet was like a dark mouth waiting to swallow me. I shone my flashlight beam. Mud churned at the bottom. Leaves drifted. I called, "Hello? Anyone there?" No answer. Only the wind through pines. But then I heard the first howl, a low, mournful wail that seemed to emanate from the water itself. I froze. It sounded like a pack of wolves, yet no wolves roamed this high elevation. The howl rose in pitch, building until I felt it in my chest, like someone scraping metal on glass. I spun the boat toward the eastern shore. The howl followed, closer, more frantic. My grip on the oars tightened until my knuckles whitened. I rowed for the main lake, straining. The howls multiplied, every direction at once, like 1,000 voices in agony. The night air was full of them. I realized with dread that the lake was singing its dead. Suddenly, the howl stopped. The surface stilled. The pines silent. I heard another sound, a whispered chant, 3 rising notes on the breeze, pause, 2 descending, repeating. I recall the patterns, like in cedar flats and silver pines. The same damn melody. Then something scythed through the water behind me, a shadow drifting beneath the boat. I tipped the oars to sea and caught a glimpse of pale, sunken eyes staring up. A skeletal hand clutched the side of the boat, splintering the wood. I cracked my flashlight on the water. Thousands of hands, arms, torsos rising to the surface. The dead submerged, drowned campers, fishermen, backpackers who vanished over decades. I froze. The dead pushed upward, gasping silent screams. The howl resumed, louder than before, driving me mad. I yanked the oars, but my arms refused to move. The dead grasped my boots, twisting my ankles. My revolver slipped from its holster. I screamed, "Get away!" But the water rushed over the boat, tilting it on its side. I fell into the freezing water, yanked beneath the surface. I came up choking, gasping. Ice-cold water filled my lungs. The roar of the dead's howls filled my ears. I gripped the boat's side and hauled myself high enough to breathe. My boots sank into the mud beneath. The dead reached for me, arms outstretched, bodies rotted. I kicked, freed my leg, and plunged ahead, swimming toward the lake's open water. The water closed over my head again. Beneath, through moonlit clarity, I saw them, dozens of drowned souls, pale faces staring. In the gloom, something larger lurked, dark, massive, shaped like a man but twisted, limbs too long. It coiled beneath me. I kicked back to the surface, gasping. I swam toward the open lake, breaking through into cold night air. The boat floated inverted. The howls echoed. I climbed onto the hull, shaking. My parka sank. Ice formed on my clothes. I lay there, shivering, watching for the dead. But they stayed in the inlet. I paddled a half swivel to check the inlet. The water had resumed its glassy sheen, not a ripple. The howling ceased. Only the whispering melody lingered in my mind. I slipped from the boat, waded to shore in freezing gloom, and ran up the trail to the station, fumbling for my keys. Inside, I locked the door, slammed it shut, and collapsed on the floor, breathing hard. The station's monitor showed no movement on any camera. I scribbled October 12th, 8:40 p.m., nearly dragged into water by submerged corpses. Evidence: rowboat damaged. Recommend advisory: avoid inlet after dark. I tried to build a fire, but my hands were numb. My mind felt frayed. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Over the next 3 days, I put up warning signs: no access to inlet. Danger. Rangers radioed me reports of missing animals, deer, bears, found on the lake's edge, void of entrails, their skins torn as if by furious claws. I sensed it was more than wildlife. Something in the water was hungry. On my 4th night, I decided to end it. I needed to destroy whatever lay in that inlet so the dead could rest. I loaded my best rowboat with 4 liters of gasoline, lighters, and tether lines. A violent thunderstorm rolled in. At 10 p.m., the sky cracked with lightning. Rain hammered the dock. I pushed off into the swollen lake, rowed as fast as I could toward the inlet, each stroke sending flashbulb arcs of lightning overhead. By the time I reached the inlet's mouth, I was soaked, half frozen. The inlet's water roiled, no longer glass but roiling black. Something surged beneath, tendrils swirling like a living mass of ink. I leveled my flashlight. Dozens of pale faces swirled under the surface, eyes glowing red. Then the water parted to reveal the massive shape I saw earlier, a towering humanoid of drowned bodies, limbs knotting into a shape like a sentinel, skin chalky white, eyes black pits. Above it, the howls rose, an orgy of agony. I swallowed bile, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I uncapped the gas can, threw it in. The gasoline fanned out, a slick sheen on the surface. The monstrous sentinel rose fully, long arms outstretched, hands dripping mold and weeds, face twisted in a permanent scream. I flicked my lighter and tossed the flame onto the gasoline slick. A ring of fire ignited instantly, scalding steam hissing in the lake's black water. The sentinel let out a howl so shrill it cracked bone. Flames licked its knees, up its torso. It thrashed, sending waves that rocked my rowboat. I ducked, shielding my head. The sentinel melted into a mound of writhing corpses, the fire devouring them one by one. Each consumed corpse released a final howl, echoing in my mind like a warped choir. Then the fire sank beneath the surface, as if the water swallowed it. There was a final gurgling scream, then silence. The lake's surface stilled, reflecting the storm-lashed sky. The dead faces were gone. The inlet's water cleared to normal dark tannin. The sentinel vanished. I sat in my boat trembling, water running down my face. Rain pelted the lake like bullets. Wind howled through the trees. I knew I needed to get back, but my arms no longer obeyed. A volley of thunder cracked overhead. Then I saw her, a young woman, hair soaked, draped in seaweed, floating just beyond the boat. Her eyes glowed red. It was Marisol. No, a different Echo. I recognized her from fleeting glimpses when she fished here years ago. She lifted an arm, pointing at me. Then she opened her mouth. No sound emerged, just ripples on the water. The lightning flared, illuminating her gaunt face. Her lips moved in a chant, a single word I recognized from an Old Coast Salish prayer, Clutchmante. A final gasp of wind and the lake's surface boiled. The canoe lurched, flung me into the water. I surfaced sputtering, arms thrashing. I swam for my life toward shore, lungs burning, waves thrashing. The howls returned, faint but insistent, of the drowned denied their rest. I made it to shore, bloodied and broken. I crawled up the rocky inlet, collapsed under a cedar, and watched as the inlet's water stilled once more. At 1:12 a.m., the station's radio crackled on. Ranger Navarro reports status. I choked out a response. I'm alive. I've extinguished the sentinel. The voice on the radio stuttered. What happened? Over. I struggled to speak. Lake inlet, a fire gone. For a moment, silence. Then, we're sending a chopper. Keep safe. Over. I slumped against a tree, shivering, battered, and whispered, "Forgive me." Days later, the lake returned to its sleepy calm. The inlet's water was clear of corpses. Rangers fished along the shore without incident. 2 weeks later, the canoe shack was boarded up, the inlet drained for inspection. They found nothing, no sentinel, no bodies, no unnatural presence. The legend of broken oars lake shifted again. Just a freak algae bloom, they said. I left Northwood River soon after. Too many nights I woke screaming, ears ringing with the howls of drowned souls. Sometimes I still hear them in crowded places, faint, echoing in my mind. And at dawn I see their pale faces in puddles on lake surfaces, yearning to break free. No one patrols Broken Oars Lake now after dark. The boathouse sits abandoned, half-rotted with creaking in the breeze. The inlet remains stagnant, bordered by rotting boards. But if you chance to pass by at midnight, you might hear a low rumble beneath the water, just a ripple and the faintest whisper, "Join us." If you venture there, bring light, and listen for the silent oars cutting through the black water, because if you heed their call, you may never return. When I arrived at Emberwood Campground in early November, smoke from distant autumn burns blurred the horizon. Emberwood sat on the far edge of Redwood National Park, ancient giants towering overhead, ferns as tall as a grown man, and campsites arranged around a half-moon-shaped clearing called a circle. The site was known for beautiful trout fishing in nearby Creek Hollow, and occasional rogue elk wandering through. What they didn't advertise was Site 13 at the far end, a tent pad scorched to cinders, a grill twisted into a crown of black metal, and a sign that read simply, "Never stay after dark." I thought it was just superstition, Campsite 13, the unlucky number. But over the next 7 nights, I discovered something far worse. Ember spirits born of wildfire trauma, an angry force that fed on fear, and a char that refused to be buried. By sunrise on my final night, I will be fleeing for my life, leaving behind only ash and terror at Emberwood Campground. My first afternoon at Emberwood, I checked in with Ranger Whitaker, a thin man with hawk-like eyes who'd been patrolling here for 15 years. No campers after October 31st. He says we walked Site 12, where the last visitors had just left. But sometimes someone slips in hunters, hippies, drifters. I try to round them up before sundown. He nodded toward Ash Circle. Stay clear of Site 13. Nobody occupies it now, but the smoke never goes away. I'm sure you'll hear stories. I nodded. That night, I set up camp at Site 2, tent, portable stove, coffee, first aid kit, my usual gear. The air was cold, scent of pine and decay. I closed my logbook. Ranger Alvarez on duty. Quiet night, no campers. As I crawled into my sleeping bag, the wind picked up, rattling leaves and sending cold drafts through the tent seams. I turned off my lamp, expecting silence. Instead, I heard a low whistle like wind through an ember pile. I froze, listening. The whistle rose, forming a pattern. 3 short notes hold 2 short notes, the same damn melody. I shoved my head out of the tent. No moon, just dark shadows among redwoods. The whistle continued, low, half human, half wind. I retreated inside, locked my tent flap, and tried to sleep. But the whistle lingered, a memory I couldn't shake. At dawn, I brewed coffee on my camp stove. The morning mist clung to the redwoods like gauze. I decided to inspect Site 13. I'd ignore the tales for now. Free rein until 8 p.m. I hiked along the main loop, past Sites 3, 4, 5, each empty, ringed with stones and fire pits. As I neared the far end, Site 12, I noticed an acrid smell, charred wood, stale smoke. The sign read, Site 13, reserved. I sneered, wondering who'd reserve a burned-out campsite. The tent pad was scorched black, center a swirl of ash. I saw what looked like footprints, barefoot, circling the pit's edge until they disappeared into the ground. The picnic table's top was warped and twisted, grill collapsed inward. Bits of melted plastic dotted the area. The ground was dry and dead. No grass, no ferns, just ash and dirt. I swept the area and found a battered journal buried near the fire pit. Its cover was burned, but inside, pages scrawled in rush script. Day 7. The fire came from the north, hurricane winds. We tried to outrun it, but it chased us. Ash here, ash there. The Ember people, they whispered. They wanted us to stay. Day 8, Emily burned. Her screams echoed in the redwoods. I thought I saw her face in the smoke weeping. I don't know what's real. The final entry was smudged with ash. Gap. I hide in the tent. Emberwood is alive. We burned them, and now they burn us back. The whistle leads you home, or so he says. There's a man in the trees, charred skin, embers in his eyes. He wants me. The ash calls. Forgive me. I felt bile rise. The journal belonged to a camper, lost, driven mad by wildfire. I snapped photos, reported the discovery in my log, and left, trailing my breath. That night, I camped at Site 2 again. My headlamp flickered. I thought I saw a figure in the trees, charred, face flickering in the firelight. I turned off my lamp and waited. A dry crack echoed as if would split in hidden flames. The ember whistle began, drawing me towards Site 13. I shook my head, came back to my tent, locked door, and shivered until sunrise. Over the next 2 days, I closed Site 13 to hikers, posted warning, scorch remains. Hazardous. Rumors circulated. At night, campfire embers rise in columns. The burnt corpse of a man roams, looking for new bodies to claim. That night, I was on routine patrol when I saw him, a hunched figure, charred skin peeling, emerging from the redwood line next to Site 7. His eyes were embers, orange gold. He stumbled on roots, dragging a skeletal branch in one hand. When he saw me, he raised his head and mouth hanging in a silent scream. Smoke curled from his shoulders, as if his flesh was still smoldering. The ember whistle emanated from his lips. I reached for my revolver, but he turned and vanished into the darkness. No rustle of leaves, no footstep. The wind carried the whistle. My vision blurred with fear. I stowed my weapon and radioed base. I saw an entity, charred man, unknown origin, retreating into trees near Site 7. They asked if I was safe. I lied, investigating. In reality, I felt like prey. That night, I barricaded myself in my tent. Every gust felt like ember wind. The whistle came at intervals, haunting, beckoning. My flashlight refused to switch on. My phone died. I listened until dawn, eyes wide. When light finally bled through, I emerged to find the ground around my tent smudged with ash, not there before. I packed and moved to the station cabin, my nerves shredded. On night 5, I decided to set a trap. I stationed a night vision camera at the edge of Site 13, baited with wood scraps and camping gear. I sat in the station, wired to the camera feed on a small monitor. Midnight came, screen flickered. In darkness, I saw ember flecks like fireflies, swarming Site. Then a shape, tall, hunched, limbs slender but charred gray. The Ember Man. He hovered at the edge of the fire circle. He reached out a skeletal hand. I watched him touch the smoldering ground. The earth hissed, smoke rising. He turned his face toward the camera, eyes aflame, a grin of burnt flesh. He cocked his head. Then he leaned forward, whispering my name in a dry rasp. Chase, come back. Heat radiated from the screen. I grabbed my radio. Control. I confirm an Ember entity at Site 13. Request fire crew to burn containment ring. They responded, hold your position. Approaching crew in 15. As I watched, the Ember Man stepped into the frame. The embers at his feet burst into flame, igniting dead needles in the pit. The fire jumped the circle, sending sparks into the night sky. I grabbed a fire extinguisher and ran out. When I arrived, flames roared 10 feet high, fed by tinder dry wood scraps. The Ember Man stood amid the blaze, unaffected. His form twisted. He turned to me, hissing like a kettle, and raised both arms. The wind whipped the flames around him, creating a vortex of sparks. I dropped the extinguisher, raised my revolver. The portal of flame around him glowed. I fired. Bullets reduced to embers midair. The Ember Man advanced. I turned and ran for the station, heart pounding. Ash rained down. The fire choked off the path behind me. I nearly tripped on a root, face digging into fungal earth. I reached the station, slammed the door, and collapsed inside. Through the window, I saw him standing at the circle's edge, embers dissipating. He raised a finger and pointed at me. Then he vanished. No smoke, no footprints, just a memory of flame. Night 6 dawned ashen gray. The fire crew returned to find only smoldering embers at Site 13. No body, no ruin. Rangers buried away the camera. I tried to file a report, but every time I typed Emberman, my keyboard glitched, lights flickered, letters jumbled. I gave up, left it blank. I stayed in the station cabin for 2 days, monitoring the forest. Ashfall blanketed the ground, making the area around Site 13 a moonscape. I noticed that the embers never fully extinguished. They glowed beneath the ash, sucking oxygen from the air. I studied old logs. One note read, "Late November, a hiker vanished in a fire pit, body never found." Another, ashes reappear overnight. I realized the entity was bound to the ground itself. That final night, I prepared to leave. Supplies packed. My shift ended at midnight. I'd camp at the ranger station overnight, then drive back to the valley road at first light. I wrote a final log entry. Ember entity observed. Remains at large. Recommend sealing Site 13 in concrete. Alvarez out. At 11:47 p.m., I sat at my desk, monitoring the cameras. All feeds were dark except one, a faint glow at Site 13. I rubbed my eyes. The ember glow pulsed, then brightened. I felt heat. The Ember Man's shape coalesced in a circle, face blackened, eyes bright as coals. The ash beneath him smoldered. He whispered, "Stay, stay with us." I grabbed my boots, slammed my flashlight on, and ran outside. The crater bubbled with flame. The Ember Man reached out. I pumped one shot from my revolver. Sparks danced, but he remained. I realized he fed on my fear. I turned and ran toward the service road, dashing over ash-crusted ground. Behind me, the Ember Man's howls grew with each step. The fire burned a path, charring grass and ferns. I sprinted, ignoring the searing pain on my cheeks from flying embers. At 11:59 p.m., I leaped into my truck, tires spinning on ash, engine roaring to life. I floored it, peeling out onto the gravel road. Behind, the entire site flared, an amber beacon in the darkness. I glimpsed the Ember Man standing among the smoldering trees, both arms raised, beckoning. I sped away, heart pounding, coughing ash-filled air. At mile marker 12, I pulled over, hands trembling, and collapsed on the passenger seat. The radio crackled. All units, report any observations at Emberwood. Over. I keyed voice ragged. Ember. Entity formed. Site 13 active. Evacuate area over. Static. Then silence. Winter came early. Rangers sealed off Emberwood Campground, chaining the gate. They bulldozed the campsites, poured concrete over the crater at Site 13, and planted saplings. But old-timers say that in late October, when the wind is still, you can hear the ember whistle in the trees, a promise of flame, a call to stay. I never slept soundly again. Sometimes I smell burn in the air, feel embers at my cheek. I see faces in the ash, eyes pleading to be freed. On cold nights, I whisper a prayer, stay away, and I hope the whole forest never rises in flame again. They called it Raven Rock Canyon, though no ravens nested there anymore. Over decades, more hikers vanished in its labyrinth of redstone fins and narrow slot passages than in any other section of Blackwood National Forest. Rangers spoke of preternatural echoes that trailed you, footsteps that weren't yours, whispers behind your back, and the forest floor strewn with bleached bones that never seemed to belong entirely to any one creature. When they transferred me to Blackwood, I doubted the legends. I faced bears, bandits, even a rogue mountain lion, and lived to tell. Raven Rock Canyon was supposed to be just another backcountry patrol. But what I discovered was an ancient hunger carving itself into flesh and bone, and by the time I escaped, I realized the canyon's appetite would never be sated. I arrived at Blackwood Ranger Station on a clear autumn afternoon. The station, tucked into a copse of firs, was a squat wooden structure with peeling paint and a metal roof dented by decades of hail. Chief Ranger Mallory, a grizzled man in his 50s, greeted me with a curt nod. Chased new patrol routes, Ranger Weaver. Raven Rock's overdue for inspection. He handed me a laminated map. Your beat is Sector 14, Raven Rock Canyon and its environs. 3 hikers went missing last month. Search party found nothing but footprints leading into the slot, then vanished. Your job, find out what's left of them, if anything. I studied the map. A jagged red line traced the ridge to Raven Rock's narrow entrance. Contour lines bunched tight where the canyon walls rose 50, 60 feet straight up. He slid a slim file across the desk. Last radio check was a month ago. After that, silence. He grimaced. 5 rangers tried searching. 1 came back raving. Stay in touch. And Weaver, keep your wits. I nodded, try not to smirk at his cryptic warning. In my pack, standard ranger kit, GIS unit, satellite radio, headlamp, emergency bivvy. I strapped on my pistol for rattlesnakes, mountaineering holds, and whatever else might lurk. I set off down the dirt road toward the canyon mouth as the sun dipped behind the firs. Raven Rock's entrance was narrower in person, maybe 12 feet wide, flanked by red stone walls that glowed in the dying light. A rusty chain stretched across a pair of battered posts, authorized personnel only. I slipped under the chain, heart thumping. The air felt cooler inside, almost damp despite the bone-dry weather. I unclipped my headlamp but didn't need it yet. The canyon sloped downward, and the fading sun's last rays filtered through gaps, painting the sandstone in fiery golds and crimsons. About 50 yards in, I found the first sign, a hiker's boot print pressed into the dusty sand. deeper than it should have been. Beside it, a faint smear of dried crimson. I snapped photos, logged GPS coordinates, then pressed on. The Slot Canyon walls rose to 30 feet on either side, twisted in swirling patterns like molten rock frozen midwave. I felt a distinct sense of wrongness, as if the sandstone conspired to watch me. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, once, twice, several times after I passed. I paused, listening. Only silence. I marked each printed footprint, following the trail deeper. At 6:48 p.m., my GPS pinged, moving into canyon interior. I radioed Mallory, Weaver to base, making initial entry. Footprints present. Proceeding inward. His reply crackled. Copy Weaver. Keep your eyes peeled. Over. I rounded a bend. The canyon widened into a small amphitheater, maybe 30 feet across, with a dry sandy floor circled by stone with weathered fluting. In its center lay a skeletal femur, bleached bone, whatever animal it belonged to lost to time. I knelt, touched it. It crumbled under my glove. A sudden breeze, like breath, riffled my neck. I turned, nothing. I felt the eyes on me, dozens of them, hid behind crevices. I swallowed and stood. Something scuttled across the sand behind me. I spun as my headlamp clicked on. Nothing. But then I saw movement. Pale shapes, no children's gloves, ragged shirts, dangling from alcoves high up. They drifted on thin strips of fabric as though caught on unseen hooks. My heart pounded. I zoomed in two left-hand children's gloves, one pink, one blue. No sign of anybody. I realized with dread someone or something had hung them there. The sunset vanished. Shadows swallowed the canyon. I pressed on carefully. At 7:15 p.m., I reached a small ledge carved into the rock, a crude notch perhaps 20 inches across, worn smooth by countless passes. Next to it, a backpack strap snagged on a bush. I tug it free. Inside were a crushed water bottle and small notebook, pages battered, one page soaked in crimson. The entry read, October 3rd. We found kids, two of them, alone, barefoot, crying. We brought them to the alcove. They said something in the walls, wanted us to stay. We tried to leave. Jack fell, broke his leg. So I ate him while we watched. Please be careful. No signature. My blood ran cold. I radioed Mallory. Weaver, I found backpack, notebook, kids mentioned. Looks like a family outing gone wrong. Blood on pages. Proceeding cautiously. He replied, understood. Bring that notebook. Over. I stuffed it in my pack, kneaded my pistol grip, and pressed on, the canyon darkening. My headlamp revealed deeper shadows. Every sound, my breathing, feet shuffling, echoed back in half-second delays, like someone imitating me. I clenched my teeth and forced myself forward. By 8 p.m., the canyon narrowed until only a few feet separated the walls. I had to turn sideways, pressing my back to one wall, knees bent. I peered behind me. The slot stretched back into gloom, my headlamp beam reaching a few yards before hitting darkness. The echo of my breathing felt amplified. Breathe, breathe. I felt edges of panic. If I moved too fast, my echo would catch up. Then I heard it, a faint whimper, like a child crying, coming from around a curve ahead. I froze, heart stuttering. The whimper repeated, high, thin, desperate. I swallowed. It sounded like a little girl. Footsteps. Quick, deliberate. Clack a clack. Something was walking toward me around the bend. I raised my pistol, but didn't want to shoot a child, if it was one. The whimpering ceased. The footsteps stopped. Only deafening silence. My pulse hammered. I called out, hello? I'm a ranger. Please, if you need help, answer. No echo. No response. I advanced a few steps, shining my headlamp around the corner. Empty slot. Only twisted fins and depths. I shone the light up. About 20 feet above, I thought I saw a pale cheek pressed against the rock, a single eye staring down. I blinked. It was gone. I swallowed and proceeded slowly, headlamp dancing across fluted walls, searching for signs. At 8:12 p.m., the canyon floor dipped sharply, dropping into a 20-foot-long trench nearly filled with rattling bones. I counted thigh bones, ribs, vertebrae, some grouped in piles. The stench of decay hung in the air, though muscles and organs were gone. The bones, many small child-sized, had been bleached white, then stained ochre by decades of mineral water. Among them lay tattered socks, fragments of toys, a rusted pocket knife. My headlamp caught movement. Something slithered across the bones. A pale, skeletal fox, eyeballs gone, fur matted, scuttled into a crevice. I shuddered. This canyon was a charnel house. Something used these bones, ate them, rearranged them. I felt the rifle hyper-pressed in my hands. I radioed Mallory, Weaver. Found mass of bones in slot. Looks like predation, human, animal, or unknown. Sending coordinates. We'll collect samples in morning. I'm heading out. But my own words echoed with uncertainty. Could I really leave? I glanced around. The trench walls were slick with ivory dust. A faint scratching came from behind me. I spun. Nothing but columns of redstone. Then a whisper, help me, help me. It came from the bones, or maybe from inside my head. I jolted, dropping my pack. The whisper repeated, louder and closer, help me, help me. I swung my headlamp toward the trench. Nothing moved, yet the whisper grew in volume until it was a chorus, children's voices chanting, help me. My first thought was flight. My second was duty. I grabbed a handful of bones, phalanges from tiny hands, and stuffed them in a sample bag. The chanting intensified, like voices just outside earshot. I pressed my free hand to my ear and covered my face. Shut up, I hissed. The bones cracked in my bag. The voices snapped off. Now silence, complete, crushing. I stuffed the bones into my pack and staggered back, feeling the walls sway. I left the trench, past the notch, and retraced my steps until the canyon opened enough to see the sky, faint stars winking above. I sprinted for the entrance, limp in my side where a jagged rock scraped me. By 8:35 p.m., I was clear of Raven Rock Canyon. Back at my camp, just outside the canyon mouth, I collapsed on the ground, cursing. My pack felt heavier, as though the bones pressed into my spine. I popped open the sample bag, bones, notebook, the pink and blue gloves. I wanted to burn them. I lit my camp stove and set the journal's cover alight. The pages curled and turned to ash. A sputter of wind blew the embers across the dirt. I stomped them out, leaving only blackened scraps. I stared at the glove fragments. They glowed faintly as though rusted. I tossed them into the fire. They burned with a high-pitched shriek, metal clasps melting, fabric bubbling. The air erupted with a cacophony of children's voices wailing in agony. I stumbled back, covering my ears. The flames flared, then calmed. The campground fell silent, too silent. No wind rustling pine needles, no insects chirping. Only the crackle of the dying embers. My heart pounded. I retreated to the darkness behind my tent, knees buckled. The fire's glow faded. Stars winked overhead. Somewhere, an owl hooted. I took deep breaths, willing my hands to stop shaking. I radioed Mallory, Weaver to base. Burned it. Bones, gloves are gone. I'm okay. His voice crackled back. Copy that, Weaver. Be advised, 3 more missing rangers last night. Search party found only footprints leading toward canyon mouth before disappearing. Over. My chest tightened. I'm headed in again at first light. Over. Proceed with caution. Over. I tried to sleep but kept drifting into nightmares. Children's skeletal faces pressed against slick canyon walls, echoing whistles, bones knitting into bodies that creaked open mouths to wail. I awoke at midnight gasping and drained. No sense in lying here. I packed, stowed the stove, and sat with my rifle upright until dawn, watching shadows lengthen, half expecting something to emerge from the trees. At 5:30 a.m., I crept into Raven Rock Canyon again, moving like a soldier into no man's land. No voices met me. No child echoes. Only the swirl of wind through slots and the crunch of sandstone underfoot. I paused at the trench, now empty of bones. Something scraped beneath the sand, like fingernails. I grabbed my shovel and began sifting. At 6 inches down, I hit something solid, half-buried backpack. I unearthed it. It was the same kind, a kid's pack with stickers peeling off. Next to it, 3 blank notebooks, each soaked in dark fluid. I flipped open the first, pages white, no writing. The second and third the same. No names, no messages. I felt uneasy. How could notebooks manufactured by different hikers end up here empty? I slung them into my pack. Above me, the sun rose, slanting into the slot. A shaft of light lit swirling dust motes. I exhaled. As I continued deeper, I discovered new footprints, ranger boots this time, size 10. I followed them, heart pounding. They stopped at the notch. Then nothing, just a slick wall impossible to scale. No sign of scramble or slide. My pulse spiked. The rangers vanished as though the canyon gulped them down. I radioed Mallory, Weaver, we found Rangers Packet Trench. No sign of them. Tracks end a notch. Recommend ground team with harness and ropes. He responded, understood. Sending 6-man team. ETA 2 hours. Over. I pressed on alone. The team would arrive too late. I wanted answers. I felt drawn by the canyon, the same magnetic tug I imagine wombats feel in monsoons, towards something hungry at the bottom. Fog began pooling in the canyon floor, unnatural for morning. The headlamp's beam barely pierced it. My radio crackled, static. I shook it. Dead. I pressed on. The walls narrowed until I had to crouch. I heard the echo of my steps matched by another pair, clack, clack. I spun, pointing the lamp. Nothing. I advanced. The echo continued until it was all I could hear. Footsteps and my own breath. Then I reached a slanted slab of stone rising out of the sand. On it, a pattern carved, a circle with 2 interlocking S-curves. It looked like a stylized eye. Beneath it, on the sand, lay a child's sandal, pink single, size 8. I recognized the pattern. The notebook earlier had that sticker on its cover. My gut clenched. I inhaled. Show yourself, I hissed. The echoing footsteps ceased. Only slithers of wind. Suddenly, a hand shot out from a crevice in the wall, small, bone pale, clutching the edge. A cry erupted from behind. Help me. A small girl's face peeked. She had sunken cheeks, coal-black eyes. Help me, she wept, stretching a bloodied hand. I knelt. Okay, I'm here. Hey, it's okay. I've got you. I brushed her cheek. It was ice cold. She withdrew as though burned. A flock of ravens caught above. She rose unsteadily on her feet, then sprinted into a narrow side crack. I chased her, turned in time to see her slip into a dark abyss. I peered in, nothing but infinite black. Panic surged. I leaned forward and she vanished. I dropped to my knees, chest heaving. The footsteps began again, clack-a-clack, but now from every direction. They formed a circle around me. I raised my pistol, flashlight bobbing. Shapes emerged in the slot's gloom, silhouettes of children, thin, ragged shadows of flesh. Their eyes glowed faint red. They drifted toward me, fingers reaching. I backed into the wall, raising my pistol. My hand shook so badly I could barely cock the hammer. I focused on the nearest, maybe a 9-year-old boy. His mouth opened wide. No sound, just a silent scream. His eyes telegraphed an ancient pain. I fired a warning shot. The bullet ricocheted off stone. The boy flinched, then advanced. I fired behind him. The shot cracked, and sandstone exploded, sending dust flying. The boy vanished. A gust of wind swirled dust or ash around me. I bolted through the narrow slot, twisting to avoid other shapes, the echoes of gunfire chasing me. My boots slipped on the wet rock. I reached the trench and scrambled up the far wall, gasping. The glowing eyes illuminated sand dunes in the trench, endless tiny hills. I scrambled out of Raven Rock Canyon, stumbling into the morning sun at 8:07 a.m. The search team arrived by helicopter, peering into the slot from above. I shook, tears streaming, pointing down. There in there, children, rangers, all trapped. Mallory radioed from base. Weaver, return immediately. That sector is locked down. I collapsed, hands covering my face. I never returned to Raven Rock Canyon. Over the next weeks, search parties found only bone fragments, scorched sandstone, and fossilized children's toys. Rangers who went in swore they heard voices begging for release. The investigation concluded that a collapsed sandstone formation likely trapped the missing, and that scavengers got the remains. They flagged the canyon as too dangerous, off limits indefinitely. But I know the truth. Beneath that slot slumbers an ancient hunger, children's ghosts, twisted by desperation, crying for freedom. The canyon's walls are carved by eons of predation. Nature's mechanisms turn malignant. Once you hear those fading echoes, the canyon remembers you. It follows you. I still awaken to whispering in the silence, fleeting glimpses of small hands in crevices, no matter where I patrolled. Raven Rock Canyon's appetite never died. It just waits patient for the next echo to answer its call. Blackwood Ridge loomed over Cedar Valley like a dark sentinel. Its slopes, dense with ancient pines, hid countless trails, some mapped, many rumored. Locals whispered of a silver-eyed stag glimpsed dancing on ridge lines at dusk, luring hunters off trail. More sinister, though, was the story of the Phantom Lane, a forgotten logging road snake-cutting through thick trees, where anyone who camped overnight never returned. By the time they found the burned-out campfires, no bodies remained, only skeletons leaning on the vire of wind-whispered pines. When they posted me to Cedar Valley District, I dismissed the tales as folklore. I'd tracked river rafters, rescued disoriented hikers, and battled blizzards on peaks. My shift today would be standard, trail maintenance, winter preparations. But by the end of my first night on Phantom Lane, I learned that reality in Blackwood Ridge could be far more terrifying than myth. The woods pulled me deeper into a trap woven by unseen phantoms, hungry, vengeful, and when I finally escaped, my nightmares became a constant companion. I arrived at Cedar Valley Ranger Station on a brisk November morning. The valley floor was already dusted with snow. Red pines wore fresh white caps. Chief Ranger Hawthorne handed me a new assignment: maintain the old guard trail that wound up Blackwood Ridge and inspect Phantom Lane for hazards. No campers on Phantom Lane after sunset, he warned. Fires always go out by morning. Come back at dawn. I nodded. It was mid-afternoon. By 3 p.m., I loaded my pack, chainsaw flares, emergency rations, first aid kit, satellite radio, into the back of my 4x4. I headed up Guard Trail, a narrow dirt road with rocky potholes. A dozen switchbacks later, I arrived at Neo Logging Camp. Deserted cabins, broken machinery, a sign reading property of Cedar Valley Timber Company. No trespassing. The camp dated to the 1970s, long since shut down. Snow filled the ruins, but I didn't see footprints. Nobody was up here. I checked my watch, 4:10 p.m. The sun would set around 5:15. I hiked to the ridge top and peered down into Phantom Lane's maw, a two-track road half eroded, flanked by trees so thick their branches interlocked overhead. It vanished into darkness beyond a curve. I stepped onto the lane, warmed by adrenaline. My radio crackled, Mallory's voice. "Weaver, any progress?" "Over." I replied, "No signs of campers." "All quiet." "Over." He didn't reply. I shrugged and clicked off. The lane sloped steeply into a hollow. I found burned-out fire rings, cold ashes, half-burned logs, scattered every 100 feet. Each ring had a pair of rusted chains and charred cooking pots. No footprints led away, only single sets leading into the woods. I photographed them, logged coordinates. Mile 0.5. I found a toppled tent frame, poles bent and broken, fabric shredded by rot. Nearby, I spied a small totem, sticks bound with twine, bits of cloth, and a photo pinned to a tree. 3 people, 2 men, a woman, smiling in flannel shirts. Beneath them, the words Cedar Valley, 1975. I looked more closely. Faces blurred, eyes scratched out, mouth slashed. A chill ran through me. I poured the photo into a plastic sleeve and jammed it in my pack. Mile 1. By 5 p.m., the lane narrowed into tracks barely wide enough for my shoulder width. Pine needles carpeted the ground. I heard my own footsteps, then behind me, crack, crack, like a twig snapped. I spun. No one. My radio crackled static. I tried, "Mallory?" Over. Nothing. Sun sank. The sky bled purple. I needed to turn back before dark. I made a mental note, ghost campfires every 100 feet, photo totem at 0.5 miles, no signs of the campers. Time 5:10 p.m. I turned, retraced steps, but found my path blocked by a fallen hemlock. Trunk cracked in AV, branches pinning it to the ground. I ducked through. A gust of wind rustled needles overhead. Snow fell in loose flakes. My breath misted. I radioed Mallory again. No reply. I tried the emergency channel. Silence. I rounded a final bend, just before the fallen hemlock, and saw a dim glow through the trees ahead. I peered at campfire, embers barely glowing. I stumbled toward it. The ring was perfectly round, 6 rocks, white. No logs remained, only coals burning low. Next to it, scattered ashes formed what looked like a large letter X. I snapped photos. Neighbors in cedar shirts. No bodies, just skewers of bone jutting out of the coals, charred finger bones, irregular lengths. I gagged, backed away. My radio crackled at that exact moment. Static, then a low, "Help me." It was a faint child's voice, pathetic, desperate. Not from a radio. It was in the woods behind me. I spun no one. Pack rattled. Snow fell harder. I decided to retreat, but as I turned, I slipped on ice. Pain bloomed in my left knee. I slid several feet before catching myself. The radio slipped from my pocket and lay half buried in snow. I froze. The child's voice, same, "Help me," came from uphill, deeper in Phantom Lane. My heart pounded. I fumbled for the radio, clutching it. My breath came in ragged gasps. I thought, I should go back, but my knee throbbed. I could not scramble back in the dark. So I limped toward the echo, setting one cheerless foot before the other. Snow still fell. Each step echoed unnaturally. Dark swallowed me. Headlamp on, I limped deeper into Phantom Lane. The snow fell in thicker curtains now, muffling the forest. My radio crackled when I turned it on, Mallory's voice distant. Weaver, do you copy? Over. Relief, then static. I pressed the button. Weaver, I'm in Phantom Lane. The injured. Heard children voices. Over. Silence. The only reply whined through pines. I reached a small clearing, old logging equipment half sunken in snow. The snowmobile helmet lay beside a chainsaw bar, bits of sawdust frozen in icy clusters. I knelt to inspect the name our Cartwright scratched into the metal. I stood, peering into the gloom. Something moved behind a pine about 15 feet away, a blur. My heart jumped. I shone the light, nothing. The roar of falling snow on branches filled my ears. I heard children laughing, peals of laughter echoing in a dozen directions at once. I froze, searching for the source. The laughter roared again, but lower, cracked, ragged, like a child more mocking than joyful. Ice covered the woods in the lamp's beam. My breath steamed. My knee throbbed as I rose, fleeing deeper toward the echo. Inexplicably, the laughter gave way to singing, lullaby in a minor key, words indecipherable, but pitiless. The tune was familiar, an old nursery rhyme about lost siblings. I'd heard it once at summer camp, but never fully learned the lyrics. Now it reverberated off the trunks. Then a voice behind me whispered my name. I spun. Light revealed an emaciated figure. A girl, maybe 8 years old, hair caked with snow, pale as death. Her eyes were pitch black. She stood motionless. I swallowed, spoke. Hey, kid, are you okay? She tilted her head, and her lips shaped words I felt more than heard. Stay with me. A gasp snowed between my ribs. I lurched backward, firing one warning round into the air. The bullet cracked the snowfall. The girl dissolved into a mist, only a swirl of black snowflakes and faint echoes of her whisper. Stay? My flashlight flickered. I toggled it off, then on. The clearing was empty. Only snow fell. The lullaby stopped. Silence. I staggered backward, swinging my beam, tripping over roots, struggling to stay upright. My knee bucked under me. I fell into deep snow and rolled across, heart pounding. I scrambled to my feet and limped back down the lane, toward the campfire at the start. But each step felt heavier, the lullaby humming in my brain. I reached the campfire ring, throwing myself into the snowbank beside it, radio in hand. Mallory, I don't know what I'm seeing. Child in the snow, singing. Over. Static. I clicked off. Frost bit my fingers. I needed shelter. I spotted a cabin frame, an abandoned shack half collapsed, roof caved in, walls sagging. I limped toward it. Inside, I found a rusted oil lamp and a small stack of wood. I fumbled to strike a match. The lamp's flame flickered to life. I placed it on a shelf, lit a small fire in a makeshift hearth. The glow revealed scratch marks on walls, some childish scrawl, childish names, crossouts, R. Cartwright, S. Perkins, B. Fields. These were missing campers. My blood ran cold. I rested against the wall, rifle in my lap. Sleep beckoned, fatigue overwhelming. I closed my eyes, but in seconds woke to a cold breeze blowing out the lamp. Darkness enveloped me. The lullaby returned, closer than before, like someone humming at the mouth of the shack. I fumbled to relight the lamp, hands shaking, sparks scattering across snow. Just as the flame caught, I saw the doorway, the outline of 4 children standing side by side, visages hidden in shadow, yet each silhouette unmistakable. A Cartwright, S. Perkins, B. Fields, and another I recognized from the logging camp photo. They held hands, swaying slightly, singing the same wretched lullaby. I scrambled back, prodding the fire until it flared. The silhouettes vanished in the glow. The wood sizzled, and I backed away. My pulse pounded like war drums. I realized the cabin door was no longer there. In its place, a wall of writhing black tendrils, tree roots curling like serpents, blocked my exit. I turned to the other side, another wall of twisting roots. No windows, only darkness. The lullaby drowned out my heartbeat. I shouted, "Stop! Leave me alone." The roots quivered, slithered toward me. I raised my rifle, but the echoes swallowed my words. Panic spiked. I scooped handfuls of wood and flung into the hearth. Flames burst higher. The roots recoiled as though scorched. I backed up, eyes flicking to a narrow side gap. I lunged for it, then felt a claw sink into my arm, bone-cold pinch. I cried out, firing around at the wall of roots. The blast cracked the wood, splintering root tendrils. I yanked free, stumbling through the gap into the last refuge, the bed corner. A small loft above, accessible by a rotten ladder. I scrambled up, banging my head. I cradled my soaked radio and rifle. Below me, the roots writhed, trying to climb. The lullaby reached a crescendo. The cabin shook. I held on, fearful the beams would collapse. Then silence. The flames guttered. The roots recoiled, retreating back through the threshold. I peered down. Only black ash and driftwood remained. I exhaled, trembling. By first light, about 3 hours later, I climbed down, limped out, and found the fallen hemlock where I'd slipped. I stumbled down Phantom Lane, hollow-eyed. The cabin was gone, reduced to a collapsed, snowbound frame. The campers' names scratched on the walls remain in my mind. I found my radio and lifelessly hit transmit. Mallory exiting Phantom Lane. Need evac. Over. Static. Chopper found me near Neo-logging camp at 7:24 a.m. I sat by the fire ring, snow caking my parka. The pilot sat down, shook his head. We came as soon as you called. Can't find camp, only that old cabin footprint. It's half buried now. I didn't want to talk. I climbed into the chopper. As the blade spun, I looked back. Phantom Lane's entrance glowed in dawn's hazy light. No signs of children, no laughter, only shifting pine shadows. Back at Cedar Valley Station, I filled out my report. Phantom Lane infiltration. Found multiple burned out fire rings, incomplete structures, child skeletal remains, encountered child entities before dawn. Cabin collapsed in forest. Exit required emergency evac. Hawthorne Reddit face grim. Will seal Phantom Lane. No further patrols. He slid a bottle of whiskey across the desk. Advice: keep moving, Weaver. They remember. I sipped and stared out the window at Blackwood Ridge, pines still dusted white. The lullaby hummed in my mind. I realized I'd never truly leave Phantom Lane. It followed me, phantoms riding on the wind, begging me to stay. Ironwood Swamp was a stretch of saturated forest 60 miles from Cedar Valley, a tangled morass of cypress knees and blackwater channels fed by bounding creeks. Rangers avoided it when they could. Vines so thick you could get lost in 10 feet, snake biters, poisonous frogs. What drew me, there was the legend of the Ironwood Hounds, spectral wolves with iron jaws that roamed the swamp at night, their howls echoing like chains on water. Campers who set foot in Ironwood after sunset vanished, and sometimes only a broken dog collar marked their passing. When the district asked me to lead a small reconnaissance, inspect cabins abandoned over the summer, check for illegal trapping, I thought it would be an easy, if unpleasant, week. But Ironwood had long memories of blood and death. By the time I staggered from the swamp's edge, my spirit was nearly gone, having faced drowned corpses turned predator, iron-mouthed phantoms, and a dark hunger rising from the mud. I entered Ironwood Swamp at noon on a humid August day. My truck's tires crunched gravel on the service road before leveling out on squat wooden planks forming the boardwalk. The sign read, Ironwood Park, authorized rangers only. I parked the truck, strapped on waders, grabbed my machete, headlamp, GPS, and extra flares. The boardwalk led to a cluster of 3 cabins, Ranger's Rest, Crooked Cross, and Broken Bog. Their wood was bleached gray by sun and marsh gas. The smell of decay, rotting leaves, stagnant water, seeped under my nose. I checked my map. Ranger's Rest was nearest. I unlocked the door, flashlight beam dancing off peeling wallpaper, shattered windows, overturned furniture. A thin layer of mud coated the floor. I searched for signs of life, footprints, containers, spare blankets. Nothing. I checked under the cot, only old newspapers dated 6 months prior. I shook my head. Recce done. Next, Crooked Cross. It sat on pilings 2 feet above water. I boarded up the windows and found a half-eaten lunch mid-table, rotten sandwich, mildewed bread. I bagged it as potential evidence and moved on. At the entrance, I spotted kennel tracks. An open gate once served as a dog exercise yard. I followed the caked mud to a broken fence. No dogs remained, only muddy paw prints leading into tall reeds. Third, Broken Bog. The door hung on one hinge. Inside, bones littered the floor. Animal, likely raccoons or possums. But then I saw half-buried clumps of black fur, and nearby a shredded dog collar stamped S. Wilkins. Sarah Wilkins, the missing camper. I stared, jaw clenched, then radioed Mallory. We have one collar, looks dog. No human remains. Possibly S. Wilkins's dog. Over. He replied, advice, keep wits, Weaver. We're sending K9 and a team. ETA 24 hours. Over. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I slipped on boots and stepped back, eyes flicking to crushing vines outside window. The cabin had a foul aura, damp, suffocating. I left, trudged back to my truck. As dusk crept in, I remained uneasy. Swamp seemed to shimmer with unseen eyes. That night, I camped at Ranger's Rest, pitched a tent on a raised platform 2 feet above water. Mud licked the wooden planks. I built a small fire, ate cold beans, and plotted my next morning's route. Beyond cabins lay miles of boardwalks and 2 ranger towers. At 11:47 p.m., the swamp came alive with frogs, insects, and the distant sound of water lapping. But beneath it, I heard something else, the faintest howling, like a wolf pack but tinny, metallic. I strained to hear. The howl rose, then cut off. I recalled the legend, ironwood hounds, wolves with iron jaws that roamed at midnight. A snap close by. I grabbed my rifle and peered into darkness. Nothing but dense reeds. My headlamp flickered as though nearing battery's end. I clicked it off. Blackness so complete I couldn't see my hand. Then a splash, like something big wading through knee-deep water. I flipped the light on. The tree lean behind my tent was empty, but prints in the mud, paw prints, 5-toed somehow, each pad elongated, led into the darkness away from cabins. I followed them, mind racing, but slipped in the muck. My boots sank to my calves. I yanked them free, cursing. As I did, I glimpsed a dark shape vanish into water. My heart slammed. I raced back to the tent, slammed door, and bolted inside. Sleep eluded me. I lay awake listening to wind in the reeds. At 3:23 a.m., I heard it, the howling twice as loud, circling the camp. I sat up. The sound moved from south to west to north. My lamp flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed me. I fumbled for a match, struck it. The campfire's dying embers flared. In that glow I saw them, 2 wolves, for shiny black, bodies half drowned, eyes shining like coals. Each muzzle glinted, a steel sheen. They crooned their howls, hungering. My blood froze. I felt powerless. I lit a second flare. The flames crackled, illuminating their forms. Skin peeled back near the jaw, exposing iron plates fused with bone. The wolves advanced, paws splashing in water, dragging rusted chains behind them. I fired, beam of muzzle flash splitting the darkness. Wolf howls turned deep, menacing. The bullets impacted their shoulder, sending sparks as bullets struck iron jaw plating. Yet they pressed on, jaws gnashed, iron teeth scraping bone. I climbed into my tent, sealing the flap. They prowled the perimeter. The fire crackled low, casting flickering shadows. I held my rifle, flares burning. The howls circled until 4 a.m., when they retreated. I waited in silence till dawn, heart hammering. At first light, I climbed onto the boardwalk, feet numb, the swamp's humidity suffocating. I marked cabin locations, collar find, wolf tracks. I traced the paw prints from the camp to a broken log jam where water pooled. There, half submerged, was a skeletal dog's head attached to rusted chain. No collar. I recoiled, stomach roiling. A few feet away, human remains, a hand bone, flesh gone, leather sandal. I snapped photos, bagged the bones. My radio crackled. Weaver, come in. I replied, voice shaky, found remains S. Wilkins's dog, some human bones. Mallory, team's 1 hour out. Secure your perimeter. Over. I wanted desperately to leave, but needed one more location, the Upper Ranger Tower. Legend said survivors hid there during floods. I hiked along the raised boardwalk 50 yards above water. Cypress knees jutted out like daggers. The howl of iron hounds echoed behind me, fainter but present. I pressed on, rifle raised. I reached the tower, weathered wood 40 feet tall, with a ladder leading up. I climbed, each rung wet, mossy. At top, a small platform and backpack. I dug through it. Half-eaten jerky, a water canteen, a folded letter. September 14th. We took refuge in tower. Water rose. Wolves circled. We fired at them. They retreated. We ran. Lost Anne. Caught in mud. Swallowed. The hounds won't let us go. If you find this, tell my wife I'm sorry. Signed, Jake Peters. No date. I slid down in a daze, heart heavy. I felt watched. At the pile of boards around the tower's base, shadows shifted. I turned, scanning the swamp. A figure, 15 yards away, stood against the cypress, draped in a wet, blackened jacket. I shouted, beam on. The figure vanished. The splash echoed. Seeps of mud bubbled up. I couldn't trust my senses. I scrambled up the tower ladder again, returned to the platform, and radioed Mallory. Found note. Hounds feed on damned. Exiting. ETA 20 minutes. Over. He replied, secure your line. Over. By late afternoon, the search team arrived. 4 Rangers, 2 K9 units. They scouted the cabins. I led them to campfire rings. Each Ranger said they felt uneasy, goosebumps, hairs on neck rising. When we reached the shack I'd spent the night in, they refused to enter. They said the cabin felt alive, breathing as though waiting. We regrouped at Ranger's Rest. Team gathered around my notes. We decided to wait until dusk before attempting to seal the cabin's thresholds with boards and nails, prohibited entry markers. I strapped on my rifle. K9 handler clutched his pistol. The sun dipped. Shadows lengthened. The swamp's call rose, frogs, insects, then faint chains dragging. The ironwood hounds returned. We fanned out. I watched my K9 partner, a German shepherd named Rex, sniff at the walkway. He stiffened, hackles raised, head turned toward the trees. The howl erupted, high, chilling. The hounds emerged, 3 of them, skeletal, skinless wolves, jaws gleaming in torchlight. Each paw dangled metallic chains, rusted and heavy. Their feet sunk into the water, but they walked with uncanny speed. My heart hammered. I raised my rifle, but bullets ricocheted off iron cheeks. One wolf hurled itself at Rex, jaws snapping. Rex yelped, whipped around, snapped back. The handler fired a round into the wolf's side, metallic clank sparks. Yet it advanced. The dog and hound locked jaws. Rex cried, slashed, then was flung into the cypress knees. I fired, 2 shots straight into the wolf's skull. The beast's head split in an explosion of sparks and steam. Yet the other 2 lunged at me. I backed up, footing slipping in mud. Splintering boards of the shack splashed to the ground. Darkness pressed in. I fired at the second wolf's chest. Bullet hit iron plate, spun away. The wolf charged, jaws wide. I fumbled with my pistol, dropped it. The wolf lunged. I dodged only by alighting in water chest deep. It nipped my shoulder. I felt iron teeth pierce fabric, scrape bone. Pain flared. I splashed deeper, paddling away clumsily. The wolf snarled, retraced with the third. Its eyes roiled red, hunger unstoppable. I dove beneath branch-thick water, swimming under half-submerged logs. When I surfaced, the hounds were gone. The swamp was silent, save my heaving breath. I staggered to shore, collapsed on a muddy bank. My uniform ripped, blood running down my side. I called into radio, Weaver, team compromised, evac now. Over. Static. The controller's answer, hold position, team extraction on the way. Over. I closed my eyes, trembling, as waves of agony and relief washed through me. Rangers arrived by helicopter after midnight, hoisted me aboard. I watched Ironwood's black water recede under a flickering spotlight. The Ironwood hounds never returned. At Cedar Valley Station, medics stitched my shoulder. I paced the ward. I couldn't rest. The whispers of children's voices, Jake Peters, Sarah Wilkins, haunted my dreams. They sealed the cabins, boarding up entrances, posting, "No entry." Danger. Search teams returned for months, canine units, underwater diverse, but found no remains apart from scattered bone fragments. The swamp's heart remained hidden, mud-slick channels where drowned people became something else, feeding the iron phantoms. I resigned 2 weeks later, scar tissue on my shoulder as memory. At home, I avoid quiet marshlands. I can still hear the hounds' howls in crowds, metronomic metallic. And sometimes, late at night, I feel cold jaws on my shoulder, as though the iron teeth never truly left. Ironwood's hunger endures, waiting for the next soul to stumble into its black water. Hollowstone Peak towered over Windfall County, its jagged silhouette visible from any vantage in the valleys below. At its base lay an abandoned granite quarry, once a booming operation until a catastrophic collapse 30 years ago. The rock slides trapped dozens of workers. Rescue teams dug for months, but found only shattered equipment and scattered bones. Locals said the mountain was cursed. On still nights, you could hear the pickaxes striking against hidden stone deep underground, echoing through the canyons. The mine's sealed entrance, now bricked over, still oozed damp that smelled faintly of rust and decay. When they transferred me to Windfall District, they needed someone to inspect the old ranger post near the quarry and reopen the ridge trail. I thought it a simple assignment. But Hollowstone Peak had secrets buried in granite, and by the time I stumbled from its shadow, I understood that some stones never forget. I pulled into Hollowstone Ranger Post at 2:07 p.m. on a humid September day. The small wooden cabin, windows barred, sat at the edge of a dirt parking area where the old quarry road terminated. The cabin's porch sagged, steps half rotted, a sign reading Hollowstone Park, chipped and faded. My orders: clear the ridge trail above the quarry, check the sealed mine entrance for leaks, and remove hazardous debris from around a post. I unloaded my gear: chainsaw, GPS, radio, headlamp, pickaxe, shovel, first aid kit. I patted my pistol holster, a precaution, though hardly anyone came this far. The air smelled of cedar, granite, and something faintly metallic. I shook it off. The peak loomed above, bathed in early afternoon sun. I stepped inside the cabin. The floor creaked. Dust motes danced in the sunbeams. Old maps were glued to a corner of the wall. Routes up the peak, locations of collapsed tunnels marked in red. I radioed Mallory, Weaver at Hollowstone Post. Beginning prep for trail clear. Over. Static. He replied, copy. Monitor radio. Over. I locked the cabin, slung on my pack, and set off up the ridge trail, which wound into thick pines and craggy terrain. Sun filtered through the canopy. Birds chirped. It felt tranquil. But as I climbed, I noticed spray paint on rocks, a circle with an X inside, hazard markers. Beneath it, a word, stay, a frown, likely posted after the collapse. I continued. By 3:15 p.m., I reached the quarry rim. Below, a gaping maw of gray granite, scarred by saw cuts. Pine stumps clung to cliffs. A backhoe sat rusted at the edge, bucket half buried in rubble. Up ahead, the sealed mine entrance, a brick wall patched over a heavy wrought iron door. The bricks, damp, blackened, seeped moisture, dripped sibilating into puddles. I scanned the wall, small cracks, each a hairline fissure in otherwise sturdy brick. I recorded GPS markers and tested the wall's integrity. Aside from the seepage, it looked stable. I marked spots needing repair, damp patches at lower corners, cracks near a corroded valve box. I radioed Mallory, seal mine entrance inspected. Minor leaks. Recommend bracing and patching. Over. He replied, copy Weaver. Then static. I turned toward the quarry rim, intent on mapping dangerous ledges. A faint echo drifted up, clank, clank, like metal striking rock. I froze, scanning the silver surfaces below. Nothing moved. I raised my pistol and moved to the edge, scanning for source. The sound receded, replaced by a low hum, almost a chant, deep and resonant. Something in my gut told me to leave, but I pressed on. I edged along the rim, marking unstable ledges. I glimpsed a figure far below, hard to make out, scaling a wall where no path existed. I stared, come back with binoculars. The figure had a hard hat, ragged clothes, but the face. I couldn't see it before it tumbled backward. A spray of dust, a yelp, then silence. I dropped my binoculars. I shouted, "Hey!" No answer. I descended via a switchback toward the spot I saw the fall. keeping a safe distance. By 4:05 p.m., I reached a narrow ledge, half devoured by erosion. Below, a body lay twisted, half submerged in a shallow pool of runoff. I shuffled to the edge with my light. The head, tilted at a grotesque angle, had no face. Flesh had peeled away, bone bare. The skull gleamed in sunlight. At its side, a pick hammer rusted. I staggered back. I radioed Mallory. We have a body, decapitated, unidentifiable. It's wearing what looks like old logging gear. Over. His reply, hold position. Sending coroner team. Over. I turned to leave, footing tumbled. I slipped on gravel, catching myself just before I fell into the pit. My heart pounded. The chant hummed again, low, echoing from deeper in the quarry. I stared downward. Shadows shifted. I hastened back up the trail. After separating with the search team, who arrived at 5 p.m., I returned to the sealed mine entrance to set up barricades. While replacing damaged bricks with tar coverings, the low humming rose clank clank again. Blood ran cold. I dropped the mortar trowel and turned to see a narrow corridor carved behind the brickwork, a crevice I didn't notice before, about a foot wide and descending into blackness. Within, I heard the faintest scrape. Rock shifted. I shouldn't investigate, but I couldn't resist. I pried a loose brick out, widening the gap enough to slip my elbow in. Cold air seethed. I slid in my headlamp and peered. A shaft of metal ladder descended into darkness. Beyond, faint flickers, like torchlight dancing against rock. I realized someone or something still lived underground. I whispered into radio, Mallory, I discovered an uncharted shaft behind the sealed entrance. I'm going down 10 feet to investigate. Over. Static. Then Weaver, negative, too dangerous. Awaiting location. Over. I clenched my jaw and descended the ladder, helmet light casting jagged shadows. Narrow tunnels stretched beneath the brickwork, slick with condensation. My footsteps echoed like drumbeats. Vines trailed down from the ceiling, roots rather than vines, thick as ropes, dripping moisture. At 20 feet down, the corridor branched, left leading upward into darkness, sealed mine, right sloping further. Followed right. At 4:52 p.m., I reached a chamber, roughly carved. Pillars of granite supported a low ceiling. On the pillars, fresh carvings, runes interwoven with figures of men and beasts, pickaxes bleeding, skulls crowned with vines. The carvings ended at a central pit, 20 feet across, 10 feet deep, filled with water black as ink. Ripples spread across its surface without visible cause. I wiped my light on my sleeve. No wind. Suddenly, from the pit, a metallic howl resounded. My head rattled. The howl repeated lower, like a mechanical gnarling. The corridor behind me filled with footsteps, multiple sets, heavy boots striking stone. The carved runes gleamed with moisture, like lifeblood. I stumbled back, reaching for my pistol. As I turned to leave, I saw at the pit's edge a shape, massive hunched. Looked like a man, clothes tattered, skin pale. The head turned toward me. No eyes, only Hollow's jaw, gaped unnaturally wide, steel teeth glinting. It was clutching a pick hammer, raised high. I squeezed off a shot. Muzzle flash illuminated the chamber. The figure lunged. I dropped the ladder top and sprinted up the sloping corridor. Wet cobblestone slick, water dripping, heart thundering. I emerged from the crevice out of breath, pulling the brick wall closed. I slapped new mortar across the gap, piled rocks to seal it. I climbed back onto the boardwalk, covered in sweat and mud at 5:12 p.m. The sun had dipped. Twilight painted granite walls pink. I radioed Mallory. Weaver at entrance sealed crevice. Encountered entity. Call it a minor specter with iron teeth. Shots fired. I'm retreating to post. Over. Static. No response. I limped back, dropping my pack on the cabin's porch. I fumbled for ammo. My hands shook. I felt watched, shadowed eyes behind every tree. I barricaded the cabin windows with old boards and nailed no entry signs. Decided to rest until dawn. I tied my pistol to my belt and set up a perimeter of flares. My headlamp's light cast long shadows that flickered off the porch timbers. I tried to close my eyes, but the chanting persisted, clank, clank, echoing from the sealed mine. Sleep was impossible. I tried to eat an energy bar. My fingers trembled. At 10:47 p.m., a resonant echo. RRAR. The earth vibrated. My flares snapped to life, flash smoke. I grabbed my pistol and stepped outside. The moon was a thin sliver, most of Hollowstone Peak's summit lost in darkness. In the quarry below, I saw movement, massive shapes sliding down the rock faces, great boulders rolling into the rim. Dust billowed. I trained my pistol toward the source. The shapes resolved into spectral figures, miners of old, climbing with pickaxes in hand. Their mouths gaped, bodies missing flesh. They wore tattered uniforms, names engraved on hard hats: M. Barlow, T. Jenkins, R. Erickson. Each chain rattled, chains used to haul granite blocks. Fallen beams lodged in their torsos. Their eyes glowed iron orange. I dropped to a crouch, fired 2 rounds at the foremost. Bullets ricocheted off steel plates embedded in their skulls. They paid no heed. They moved past, descending deeper into the quarry's maw, toward a black opening at ground level. They advanced in military precision as a small battalion. My mind reeled, hundreds of them, forever bound to the stone. I stumbled backward, tripped on a board, hit my head. Dazed, I regained composure. The hounds of the miners' spirits had sharpened their pickaxes into weapons. They wouldn't be stopped by bullets. I sprinted back into the cabin, battered my door shut, and locked it. My flare smoke choked the night. Inside, I felt the floorboards shudder. The stones scraped against rock below, like the miners were climbing up. The cabin's walls quaked. The coffee table shuddered. I grabbed my pistol and held the door brace. Scrapes and thumps filled my ears as they tried to force entry. A miner's lean shape appeared through a cracked window, fleshless hands scraping the glass. I squeezed the trigger, smashing the window. Glass flew. The shape vanished. I edged back, feeling the cabin sway. The ceiling collapsed, timbers crashing down. I ducked under a desk as splinters rained. The shape of a miner stepped into the cabin, gout of dust at its feet, pickaxe poised to strike. I aimed at its skull. The muzzle flash rebounded off its iron jaw plating. The figure snarled, gnashed teeth. I dropped to the floor, scrambling for flares. I fumbled one out, lit it. Flares flare, burn a path to the front door. The miners recoiled, their ragged forms dissolving into cinders at the threshold. I leaped for the door, slammed it shut, turned the lock. I knelt back to the door as the remaining miners circled beyond. Their wails, shook the cabin. At 11:13 p.m., I dialed Mallory on my satellite radio. Weaver to base, send evac now. Minor phantoms. Impossible. Can't hold them off. Over. Static. A surge of energy. The radio died. I pressed the PTT button. No radio. Total dark. I bashed a window for cover and leaped out into the dust. The eruption of cinders from the flare cast ghostly light across the fall line. I ran for the ridge trail as the miners chased, picking up speed, shards of rock ricocheting on the boardwalk. Each step hammered into the rotten floorboards. My knees burned. My lungs seized as I sprinted up the switchbacks. Their howls faded as I reached the ridgeline by 11:45 p.m. I didn't slow until I hit my truck, took the keys, smashed the window with my pistol, yanked the ignition. The engine roared. I sped down the dirt road, leaving Hollowstone Peak behind. As I cleared the tree line, I saw the miners at the quarry rim, thin forms etched in cinders, raising their pickaxes in anguish. I slammed the pedal. Dust swirled. The roar of the miners' howls chased me until I was well below. I filed my final report from Windfall District Office. Minor phantoms encountered. No further entry recommended. Hollowstone Peak remains off limits. They officially dismissed my account as fevered imagination. But I carry souvenirs, splintered shards of iron-plated bone in my pack, nightmares of pickaxes striking stone, spectral miners climbing from depths to claim new quarry. Nightmares blur into waking hours. I see that sealed mine entrance everywhere. Doors in abandoned schools, windows boarded over. At times I hear the clank, clank of iron against granite in the silence. I keep a flare in my glove box and check my pistol every dawn. Some nights, I'm sure I feel a pickaxe at my shoulder, reminding me that Hollowstone's hunger never sleeps, and the stones still echo with phantom strikes.